Chapter 987. The yellow sand was endless and the wind was blowing the flags. There were many wind and frost along the way, and the sun, moon and stars were just decorations. The escorting guards were scattered and did not have much respect for the people in the carriage. A maid-like young lady walked over from the back of the convoy and jumped onto the carriage before handing a bowl of porridge to the person inside. "Your ladyship, the porridge is a little cold, but it can still be eaten. Currently there is no village ahead or inns behind, so it is better for you to have a mouthful." The female in the carriage was still young, but her expression was very haggard and her attire was not very exquisite. Upon closer look, it was the style from a few years ago, and because she was skinny, it did not fit her body. She lifted up the curtain of the carriage and asked, "Where are we now?" "Walk a bit more and one would be able to reach the official road before dark." Bai Lu smiled. This servant had asked those people, and within 5 days, one would definitely be able to return to the Ding capital. Shuangjiang also smiled. "Once one returns to the palace, your ladyship's bitterness will be over and sweetness will come." Bitterness will be over and sweetness will come. Shen Miao smiled bitterly. Broken people would not be able to return. She was talking about Jing Guyu. Hearing this, Bai Lu and Shuangjiang's eyes were filled with sorrow and no longer spoke. Jingzhe was willing to be a concubine in order to rope in the powerful officials, and in the first year that Shen Miao went to the Qin country, news came that the wife of the powerful official found a reason to beat her to death. As for Gu, Shen Miao clenched her fists but died in Huangfu Hao's hands to protect her. 5 years. A full 5 years. In the 5 years in the Qin country, the last bit of arrogance in her body was ground away. She clenched her teeth and compromised just so that one day she could return to her homeland and reunite with her pair of children. However, the heavy price they had to pay for this was not something that could be described by outsiders. How difficult was this journey? There were not even many escorting guards, and just looking at the convoy of carriages, who would have thought that this was the honor guard of a country's empress? The people she brought to the Qin kingdom at that time had either died or dispersed in the past 5 years, and they were almost gone. Just like on this journey back to the country, if not for Mo Qing's protection, she would definitely not be able to return alive. Shen Miao sighed. Fortunately, all the suffering was not in vain. 5 years had finally passed. Just as he was thinking about it, it was time for the carriage to continue its journey. However, not only did it not start, there was a commotion in front of them. She frowned slightly and lifted the curtain of the carriage to ask, "What's going on?" Mo Qing walked over from the front and said, "I met a strange person and came over to ask for water." Before he finished speaking, one saw an old man dressed in gray appearing behind him and looked at Shen Miao with a grin. "Friend, I am dying of thirst. Give me some water to drink." This old man was dressed in a strange manner and his body was smelly as he stared straight at one, making one suspicious. It was not that he was not willing to give water to drink, but Shen Miao's identity was special, and if she met someone with evil intentions, one feared that something would happen. Mo Qing ordered people to hold back this old man and not let him go near Shen Miao. However, Shen Miao smiled and said, "There is a drought along the way and the heavens are not happy. A bowl of water is equivalent to a life. Give it to him." "I do not lack this bowl of water to drink." Since Shen Miao had spoken, Mo Qing was straightforward and ordered people to bring a bowl of clear water for the old man. The old man gulped it down in one gulp and patted his stomach before pushing away the guard's hand and stood up. He gave a proper bow to Shen Miao and said, "Furin is kind and generous and saved this poor Taoist's life. This poor Taoist must repay this bowl of water." "Poor Taoist?" Shen Miao was surprised for a moment before smiling. "Are you a Taoist?" "My Buddhist name is Qi Yen." That strange old man looked at Shen Miao and shook his head. "Furin's appearance is extremely valuable, but one's life is shallow and cannot bear the noble fortune." Chapter 988. What nonsense are you talking about? Bai Lu frowned and looked at Shen Miao. "Mother, Furin, it might be some Jianghu swindler. Do not listen to his nonsense." Mo Qing also made a move to drive this strange old man away. "Wait," Shen Miao said, "it is quite boring along the way. Listen to what others say." That old man pretended to bow again. There is black air between Furin's brows. One fear that it is not good. At the end of the road, it is an ominous sign. If one were to turn the horse around, one would be able to avoid this calamity. Furin, this poor Taoist still advise you that this road is the Yellow Springs and one must not walk on it. Once walked, one cannot turn back. The more you speak, the more excessive it is. Shuangjiang was so angry that her face was livid. Who are you cursing? Xin Miao, however, had a good temper. She had stayed in the Qin country for a long time, and when facing anyone from Mingqi, she would have the joy of meeting someone from her hometown. Even if this old man was speaking nonsense, she was not angry and only smiled. Many thanks, Taoist priest, for the reminder, but I must walk on this road. My children are on this road and I have to return home. The strange Taoist priest sighed deeply, as expected. He looked at Xin Miao. Meeting by chance, this is fate for you. Finishing, he took out a red string from his sleeves and was about to pass it to Xin Miao but was stopped by Emo Qing. He could only hand the red string over to Emo Qing, and when Emo Qing did not see anything strange, he then handed it over to Xin Miao. This red string is this poor Taoist's token of gratitude to Furin. Furin can tie it on your wrist and you will be able to achieve your own fate. He solemnly said, Furin must remember that the way of heaven is treacherous and depends on human effort. This poor Taoist can see one's fate but cannot change it. The person who can change Furin's fate is not this poor Taoist. The heavens have the virtue of cherishing life, and if there is a calamity there is also fate. This red string is a question, and one day Furin will also find your own solution. Finishing, he laughed out a few times before turning around and striding away. This Taoist priest was very mysterious, and the few prophecies that he said were extremely inauspicious. Thus Bai Lu and Shuangjiang were somewhat unhappy. Bai Lu said, Your ladyship must not take that strange person's words to heart. Most likely his mind is not clear. Don't wear this thing. Shuangjiang also said, It is very inauspicious. But Xin Miao looked left and right and felt that the red string was extremely cute and inexplicably loved it so much that she could not bear to part with it. Instead she tied it on her wrist and smiled. I have already said that since it is fate, it is also fate for us to meet by chance, so just wear it. It doesn't matter if it's fake. Isn't it better if it's real and has more spirituality? Since the words were spoken like this, Bai Lu and Shuangjiang could not say anything more. Emo Qing said to the carriages in front to set off and started to move again. The sandstorm in the distance almost covered their figures, but the strange old man's figure could no longer be seen on the road ahead. Upon returning to Mingqi, it was not like what Shuangjiang said, bitterness is over, sweetness begins. The world was constantly changing. The situation would change, and so would people's hearts. As the Empress, apart from this position, there was nothing special about her. Sometimes when he thought about it, he felt that it was no better than the days when he was humiliated in the Qin kingdom. When he was in the Qin country, those injuries were on the surface, but in Mingqi, it was in the dark. It was as if one had suffered a hidden loss and one could not say it out loud, but one would be laughed at for nothing. Shen Miao sat in the Kuining palace and looked at the somewhat withered red sleeve grass on the table. The red sleeve grass was sent over by Mo Qing and was said to be a rare spiritual herb. It looked very good and was like a woman's sleeves that fluttered in the wind, thus it was named red sleeve grass. It was just that one did not know why it had recently withered, and Shen Miao was not in the mood to take care of it. She had been back in Mingqi for a few years, and in these few years, her life was not considered good. Chapter 989. There was an additional Mei Furin in the inner palace. Mei Furin was delicate and intelligent, charming and gentle, like a riddle that attracted one's gaze to her for a long time, unwilling to leave. In the beginning, there were times of heartbreak. The man that she once loved would use that kind of doting gaze to look at the woman beside him. She thought that he treated everyone with the same coldness, but later discovered that it was not the case. It was just that that person was not herself. After many days of heartbreak, she gradually became numb. The pain and dispiritedness gradually turned into hatred and unwillingness. Because of Fu Sheng. Fu Sheng always took away too much of Fu Xiuyi's favor, and her child, Fu Ming, was obviously sitting in the crown prince's position and was obviously talented and hardworking, but at the end he was like a prince that had fallen out of favor. Fu Xiaoyi could personally teach Fu Xing how to write and discuss politics, but was stingy to give Fu Ming a look of concern. When asked, he would say that Fu Ming was the crown prince and must be mature and steady. What was the matter with pestering imperial father every day? But every time she saw Fu Ming's disappointed eyes, Shen Miao's heart would feel as if a knife was being twisted in her heart. The Shen family was also not doing well. Luo Shuiyan's illness was getting worse, and Jing Chuchu and Shen Qiu were dragging it out. The Shen family's reputation was getting worse, and Shen Xian had aged a lot. Fu Xiaoyi seemed to be suppressing the Shen family, and Shen Miao was faintly aware of it. But how could one in the inner palace clearly know about the matters in court? The only way she could come into contact with these was through Pei Lang, but Pei Lang was loyal to Fu Xiaoyi. Even though Pei Lang's relationship with her was not bad, but he would always be loyal to Fu Xiaoyi first. Shen Miao's infatuation with Fu Xiaoyi had long turned into ice after watching him being together with Mei Furen for the past few years. But in her position, she had to sit firmly in the position of Empress and fight for some opportunities for Fu Ming and Wan Yu. There was news from the Xiongnu side that Mei Furen seemed to want to urge Fu Xiaoyi to marry Wan Yu over. This was what Shen Miao could not tolerate. However, Mei Furen's methods were getting more and more brilliant. Everyone could see Fu Xiaoyi's doting towards Fu Sheng. The Shen family was getting worse day by day, and there were too many people who stood at Mei Furen's side. Throwing stones at someone who was down, everyone wanted to step on them. In addition, Mei Furen's brother, Li Ku, had recently helped Fu Xiaoyi to settle several important matters, thus Mei Furen's status in the inner palace rose steadily. Shen Miao knew what the officials were thinking. They were thinking about when to change the crown prince and when to abolish the empress. But Fu Xiaoyi still wanted to save face. She was the first wife, and for Mei Furen to go over her head, it would not be that simple. She fought back and forth, going round and round, but her heart was already exhausted. If it wasn't for this pair of children, he sometimes felt that it would be better to burn the entire palace to the ground. That way, the world would be at peace. Bai Lu walked in and said, "Nyang Nyang, the clothes for the palace banquet have been prepared. It is better to comb your hair early." Shen Miao complied. Shuangjiang had died a year ago, and Mei Furen's methods were very good. She did not even let off the maid by her side. After going around in circles, only Bai Lu was left. Tonight was the Ming Qi's palace banquet. The new year was approaching, and Fu Xiaoyi wanted to reward the officials. Of course, the most important thing was to send off the little Marquis of the residence of the Marquis of Lin and Xie Jingxing. The Marquis of Lin and Xie Ding died in the battlefield of the northern Jiang, and now his son was going out to battle again. In fact, this timing was not good, and one would feel that this departure was somewhat tragic, but Xie Jingxing still accepted the commander request. Shen Miao and Xie Jingxing did not have much interaction because of the subtle relationship between the Shen and Xie families. Ever since the time of Xie Ding in the residence of the Marquis of Lin, and only Xie Jingxing was supporting the door. This unavoidably made one sigh. Initially the southern Xie and northern Shen, until now the Shen family was getting worse day by day, and the Xie family was also gradually declining. It really made one sympathize with the death of the rabbit. Chapter 990. But Xie Jingxing had his own path to walk, so how would Shen Miao's own path not be difficult? She said, "Comb the hair." The musical instruments confused one's heart. This palace banquet was exceptionally lively. Fu Xiaoyi had not been this happy for a long time. His usual stern expression was much gentler, and his smile became especially joyful. Shen Miao looked coldly at Fu Xing, giving him a toast and the happy and harmonious appearance of the father and son, but her heart was somewhat cold. Fu Ming sat at one side, and Wan Yu also sat properly. Those officials always praised the crown prince and princess for being so sensible at such a young age and had the demeanor of a little adult. This kind of dignified bearing was not something that everyone was able to grow up to. Even though it was polite words, it was not far from the truth. But one did not think that if one could wantonly act coquettishly, who would be willing to be sensible? Sensible was just forced out. Wan Yu and Fu Ming also tried hard to be close to Fu Xiaoyi, but children's thoughts were the most direct and pure. They could feel Fu Xiuyi's coldness and gradually became polite and courteous. Shen Miao sat beside Fu Xiuyi but saw that Fu Xiuyi would exchange glances with Mei Furan from time to time. Mei Furan was smiling happily and Fu Xiuyi also had a slight smile on his face. Shen Miao thought that both of them must be really happy. But what about the main character of this palace banquet? Shen Miao involuntarily looked towards the man on the left side of the banquet. That young man's appearance was peerlessly handsome and his posture was indolent as he sat diagonally. His dark purple robes were somewhat large but it could not hide his high spirits. His lips had a smile as he slowly drank his wine, as if the noise in the banquet had nothing to do with him and was incompatible with the liveliness. Shen Miao laughed in her heart and felt that this little marquis of the residence of the Marquis of Lin and was somewhat similar to her. The banquet was lively and joyous, but in fact the heart was not happy. Xie Jingxing wanted to walk on a bloody path where life and death were uncertain and she did not know what the ending of her life would be. Being attacked from all sides and besieged on all sides, it was a matter of life and death hanging by a thread. She also took a wine cup and poured herself wine to drink. She drank one mouthful at a time but she was extremely restrained. The Empress had to be dignified and elegant and must not be a pampered concubine. When the banquet was over, the guests dispersed in twos and threes. She sat in her seat and heard Mei Furan say, "Your Majesty, tonight this concubine has prepared good wine. Your Majesty and this concubine will watch the fireworks together." Er also said that he wants to compete with your Majesty in chess skills. Fu Xiuyi laughed and pointed at Mei Furan's nose. "This competitive nature is exactly the same as you." Shen Miao's sentence, "One you and the Crown Prince also want to accompany the Emperor throughout the year," was swallowed back. Looking back, the sadness in the eyes of the two children made her heart ache. However, he endured the pain and put on a calm expression. But on this new year he couldn't fall asleep no matter what. She coaxed the two children to sleep and felt that the two children were not enthusiastic about the arrival of the new year. There were sounds of fireworks coming from the palace walls. It was already late at night and in this kind of night, Mei Furan's palace was the best place to see fireworks. The three of them must be very affectionate. Shen Miao put on her clothes and ordered Bai Lu to bring a jar of wine and a bowl before she went to the garden. From the corner of the garden, one could see the fireworks. Only a small half of the fireworks could be seen, but even a small half was extremely gorgeous, almost lighting up the entire sky. One could imagine the other end, to be able to see the whole picture, what kind of scenery it was. She took out a bowl and Bai Lu was somewhat distressed. Shen Miao waved her hands, telling her not to open her mouth. Chapter 991. This firework is really beautiful. Shen Miao's voice was low and there was a hint of drunkenness. When can one watch a complete set? She suddenly smiled again. Most likely not. Just as she was speaking, she heard footsteps coming from behind. Boots stepped on the snow, making a sha-sha-sha sound. Bai Lu jumped in shock. "You all..." Shen Miao turned back and saw someone brushing away the heavy shadows of the trees and walking forward. A person dressed as a guard was at the back and the person standing in front was tall, wearing a purple robe and green boots. That pair of peach blossom eyes reflected the fireworks in the night, making it exceptionally bright and moving, looking very beautiful. "Marquis Xie of the residence of the Marquis of Lin?" Shen Miao narrowed her eyes as she looked at him. That person seemed to be somewhat surprised and made a tisk sound. Fu Xiuyi's Empress is actually a drunkard. The guard behind him said, "Master, we should leave." Bai Lu was also somewhat nervous as she did not know why Xie Jingxing was still in the palace. But an empress and an official, if they were to be seen standing together, one did not know what would happen. Especially these days Shen Miao was struggling in the palace and once someone caught hold of a reason, they would not hesitate to splash dirty water on her. At this time, it was better to be as far away from this heir of the residence of the Marquis of Lin, and Bai Lu did not dare to disturb others and this garden was very remote, so she said in a small voice, "Shiziyi, the Empress is slightly drunk and this servant is about to help her back. Shiziyi, please pretend not to see it." Xie Jingxing glanced at Shen Miao and laughed. He did not seem to be interested and turned around to leave. "Wait." Shen Miao called out to him. Bai Lu was startled and could not wait to cover Shen Miao's mouth. But Shen Miao stared at Xie Jingxing. She was somewhat drunk at this moment. Ever since she went to the Qin country, she had never wantonly drank wine. However, the saying of a cup of wine to solve 1,000 worries was not false. When one was drunk, one would be relaxed and would do many things that one would not do on normal days. She said, Ben Gong heard that you are going to the northern Jiang? Xie Jingxing hugged his chest and said with a smile that was not a smile, what instructions does Empress have? Tai Yi and Bai Lu stared at Shen Miao. Shen Miao smiled and took out the bowl that she had just drunk from the table and poured the wine from the jar into it. She indicated to Xie Jingxing to see, young talent, an eternal character, outstanding and unparalleled in the world. Xie Jingxing raised his eyebrows and Bai Lu was so embarrassed that she could not wait to drag Xie Jingxing away. How would one praise a flower in front of others? Beijiang is a very bad place. Shen Miao patted his shoulders. Her stature was petite and she had to tiptoe when she patted others' shoulders. She then looked at Xie Jingxing and said half seriously and half drunkenly, heard from father that not even a blade of grass grows there and the terrain is treacherous. There are many poisonous snakes and insects and it is easy to fall into a trap. Your trip will be fraught with danger. This official thanks Nyang Yang for her concern. Xie Jingxing casually said, thousands of years of infamy in the annals of history, a loyal heart to repay the Son of Heaven. She gulped down the wine in her mouth and waved the bowl in Xie Jingxing's hand before swallowing it in one gulp. Bai Lu and Tai Yi jumped in shock. The former did not think that Shen Miao would drink it just like that and the latter was surprised that the Empress would be so forthright. Shen Miao wiped her mouth and gave a burp. This is Ben Gong's toast to you. You must return triumphantly. Xie Jingxing stared at her. Her lips still had some wine that had not been wiped clean and was sparkling on the side of her lips. It was very beautiful and under the moonlight, her face had a delicateness that could not be seen during the day. Without the layer of Empress shackles, she was actually a very delicate and pretty female. Chapter 992. His lips hooked up and there was some evilness in his smile as he slowly said, it seems that the Emperor has given the Empress a cold shoulder. Bai Lu's eyes widened. This Xie Jingxing's words were too presumptuous but she did not dare to directly drag Shen Miao away in case Shen Miao made any noise and alarmed others, then she would not be able to clear her name. After Shen Miao finished drinking, she swayed as she picked up the wine jar and poured a full bowl before handing it to Xie Jingxing. You also drink. Why should I drink? Xie Jingxing was baffled. You and Ben Gong are in the same boat. Shen Miao said. Who is in the same boat as you? Xie Jingxing found it funny. Shen Miao had already raised the wine bowl and was about to feed it to his mouth. Bai Lu turned pale with fright. This was too ambiguous. Tai Yi was also extremely surprised but Xie Jingxing did not speak so he would not make a move. Xie Jingxing was caught off guard and when he pushed Shen Miao away, a lot of wine spilled onto his clothes but when he looked at Shen Miao, he finally smiled in satisfaction. She said, you and I have a bowl of wine of affection. When you return in triumph, then come and watch the fireworks with Ben Gong. Xie Jingxing felt that today was really inexplicable. So when a female was drunk, they would not be rational. Even the usually dignified and elegant Empress was like a different person. Your Highness the Empress, it is better to find His Majesty to watch. He tidied up his clothes. Shen Miao was sad. Ben Gong have never watched fireworks with him. Xie Jingxing stared at the female opposite. Her head was slightly lowered and the corner of her mouth was raised but her eyes were bitter. His heart inexplicably softened a little and said, good, good, good. This official promises you. Shen Miao's eyes brightened as she looked at him, then it is settled. Xie Jingxing nodded his head. Shen Miao thought about it and shook her head, words have no basis. One must have a token. She then started to touch the hairpin in her hair. Bai Lu was surprised for a moment and secretly thought that it was not good. If the Empress thing was on Xie Jingxing's body, then it would be a crime of adultery. He was afraid that Shen Miao would give any handkerchief or hairpin to the other party and suddenly saw the red string on Shen Miao's wrist, He had an inspiration and said, "Your ladyship, your red string is very good." Shen Miao's eyes landed on the red rope and her heart moved. She quickly untied it and took Xie Jingxing's hands and tied it for him seriously. Xie Jingxing's gaze landed on her slightly raised eyelashes. They were moist and seemed to be mixed with the cold air of winter. It inexplicably made one's heart itch. Shen Miao fastened it for him and smiled at him. "This is Bengong's token for you. Take this as a letter and wait for your triumphant return." "Thank you, Your Highness." Xie Jingxing smiled carelessly, "But this official does not have any token to give to Empress. Why don't I give the Empress a wish?" "Wish?" Shen Miao looked at him. "When we meet again in triumph, this subject can grant Your Highness a wish. The wish that Your Highness wants, this subject can fulfill it. I will do my best to fulfill it." Shen Miao said, "It is a promise. It is a promise." With a boom sound, a corner of the sky was once again illuminated by the bright fireworks. Both of them looked at it at the same time, but it was as if they had a tacit understanding and were exceptionally in sync. Bai Lu was also stunned. Fireworks were fleeting, but some things would not disappear, such as this night. When Shen Miao woke up again, she only felt a splitting headache. As she rubbed her forehead, she stood up and walked to the table, actually slept for such a long time. Bai Lu brought the hot soup to her and said, "Your Highness drank too much yesterday. Sober up first." Drank too much? Shen Miao's movements paused. One did not drink much at the palace banquet. Bai Lu was somewhat guilty. Most likely the wine in the palace banquet was too strong. Shen Miao nodded her head and sighed. Bengong's bad habit of not remembering anything once drunk has not changed for so many years. But it has been a long time since I was drunk. Bai Lu nodded her head and heard Shen Miao looking at her empty wrist. "Why did the red rope disappear?" Bai Lu said softly, "Most likely it was lost." Shen Miao sighed. Indeed, it would not last long. The sun was blazing and the departing troops were at the city gates. The young man in the lead was riding an imposing horse and had a lazy smile on his face, but his eyes were so cold that one did not dare to look at him. "Master, everything is ready," Tai Yi said. Xie Jingxing took a look behind him. Once out of this city gates, the future path would be completely different. It also meant that he had made a clean break with the past and would no longer be involved. Eventually he would have to leave. There is nothing worth to be nostalgic about here. The white-clad male at the side waved his fan and said, "It has nothing to do with you. Perhaps everyone is hoping that third older brother would not return." The pine-green-robed gentleman smiled and looked to the front. "No matter what, one will finally return home." "Not necessarily." Both of them looked towards that purple-clad male. Xie Jingxing lowered his head and his gaze landed on his wrist. There was a red rope tied there, and the end of the red rope was neatly and carefully knotted, as if it would not loosen no matter what. "Isn't this something that females wear?" Jiu Shu asked. "Why are you wearing this for?" "After drinking someone's farewell wine, one owes someone a wish." Xie Jingxing said, "One will return it after returning." He retracted his gaze and raised his whip. "Rise. Set off." Chapter 993. Time was like an arrow. The sun rose and set as in the past. Then how many rounds of flowers would bloom and how many rounds of flowers would wither? The moon would have waxing and waning, not to mention human affairs. For example, the declining Shen family and the increasingly neglected Empress. Like an old woman struggling in her twilight years. Princess Wan Yu died of illness on the way to the marriage, and Empress Shen was unable to recover. Even though she was still dignified and virtuous, upon closer inspection, there was a faint aura of death in her eyes. That aura of death would only flash like a weak star when it saw the crown prince, like the embers in the ashes, but it looked like it was about to extinguish. The beautiful lady in palace attire smiled as she looked at the green-clad male in front of her. "Imperial tutor, to take a drop of blood from the Empress' fingertip, it should not be a difficult matter for you." Pei Lang looked at the woman in front of him. She was as charming as a cat in the dark night, shrewd and beautiful. Otherwise, that aloof emperor who always prioritized benefits would not hold her in the palm of his hand. From a female's point of view, She was undoubtedly seductive, as she grasped a man's thoughts in the palm of her hand. From a person who wields power, she did a good job. Retreating in order to advance, she never took the initiative to mention status or ask for gold and silver, but made others willingly offer things up. Not only that, she would even snatch other people's things. Instructing others to fight, relying on the heart of an emperor, relying on the support of brothers, quietly and slowly grasping what she wanted in the palm of her hand. She looked as charming as a flower, but had the heart of a snake and scorpion. That year the little princess, who was only 10 years old, was forced to the end by this person? In comparison, the master of the 6 palaces was still not as vicious as this one. Perhaps it was because she came from a loyal family like the Shen family that no matter how her character changed, there was still some leeway of kindness in her bones. But it was this kindness that made her destined to always be inferior to the other party's methods. Mei Furen saw him in a daze and said, "Imperial tutor?" Pei Lang recovered to his senses and asked after thinking, "What does Imperial Consort Shen want the Empress' fingertips' blood for?" "You do not need to know what to do." Mei Furen's smile was like a flower. Even though she was already an Imperial Consort, she still had the initial title. Mei Furen, upon hearing it, one could tell that it was 100 charming and 1,000 tender, extremely moving. It made one forget that in the depths of the palace, the delicate and beautiful flowers also had poisonous thorns. She said, "Imperial tutor can clearly see what kind of situation Empress is in now." She pointed at the rattan grass that was sandwiched between 2 trees outside the window and said with a smile, "When this rattan grass just sprouted, it was sandwiched between 2 trees. He didn't have to choose anything. He could live a good life casually. But when it gradually grows up, the taller it is, the stronger the wind and rain. I have to find a place for myself to climb." She looked at Pei Lang. "There's a tree on the left and a tree on the right, but it can only choose to climb one tree. These 2 trees occupy the same area and are fighting over the same piece of land. There is only so much land, so one of the trees will definitely be cut down. This vine must be chosen carefully. If it climbs up the tree that is about to be cut down, it will be uprooted." Mei Furen looked at Pei Lang with a smile. "Imperial tutor, how do you think this rattan grass should be chosen?" Pei Lang stared fixedly at the 2 trees outside for a while. After a while, he turned his head and said, "This subject understands." Mei Furen smiled in satisfaction. After Pei Lang left, a palace maid came out from the back to pour tea for her and said softly, "Your ladyship, will the Imperial tutor really take the Empress' fingertips' blood? The Imperial tutor and the Empress seem to be not bad." In terms of friendship, Pei Lang had known Shen Miao for a longer time than Mei Furen. Chapter 994. The Imperial tutor is an intelligent person. Mei Furen picked up the tea and took a sip before smiling. Otherwise, when the princess was engaged, he would not have stood by and watched. Moreover, he has hidden thoughts in his heart. He is such a bright wind and bright moon, and is so rational that he does not allow himself to make any mistakes. Naturally, one must cut the weeds and remove the roots. I am helping him, and it is too late for him to accept it. The palace maid nodded her head as if she understood and said, "But what that monk said, to be able to borrow the Empress's fate to your ladyship, is that true?" No matter if it is true or not, the position of the mistress of the 6 palaces is set for me. A trace of ruthlessness flashed in Mei Furen's eyes. "It is only a fingertip's blood. Give her luck to me, and when my imperial son stabilizes the Ming-Chi's country, I will be merciful and burn paper money for the 3 of them." The palace maid nodded her head and did not dare to speak. Shen Miao's illness was somewhat serious. Fu Ming had just come to see her and accompanied her to chat for a while. Shen Miao wanted to find someone to ask about the recent situation in the Shen residence, and just as she left the courtyard, she saw Pei Lang. Pei Lang greeted her, but Shen Miao was very cold. On the matter of Wan Yu's marriage, Pei Lang's cold attitude made one's heart turn cold. In any case, their friendship had been going on for so many years, and Wan Yu had once called him teacher. And the disgust towards Fu Xiuyi had naturally shifted to the disgust towards Pei Lang, and she did not even want to take another look at Pei Lang. "Heard that the Empress has fallen ill." Pei Lang handed over a box. This? Perhaps it would be good for your ladyship's cough. Shen Miao swept a glance at him and opened the box. It was a stalk of medicinal herb that looked inexplicably familiar. When Shen Miao took it out to take a look, her fingertips suddenly felt pain, and when she looked again, it was pricked by the thorns on the herb. Beads of blood flowed down her fingertips. Bai Lu exclaimed and wanted to bandage it for her. But Pei Lang stared fixedly at her fingertips and said somewhat woodenly, "This is red sleeve grass, useful for coughing." Shen Miao smiled instead. She threw the herb into the box and closed the box before returning it back to Pei Lang and said coldly, "No need. Ben Gong once had a stalk of this herb, but it withered at the end. Moreover, the stalk of herb that Ben Gong raised did not have thorns on it." Her words had other meaning. If one do not want to give gifts, then do not give. Not to give. Not to give. Her words had other meaning. If one do not want to give gifts, then do not give. Please take it back. With that, he turned around and left without looking at Pei Lang again. Pei Lang held the box tightly in his hands and stared at Shen Miao's back with a complicated gaze. Ling Tu. Ming, Shen, Miao, Doctor. Pei Lang looked at the box. People always had to make some choices. The higher one was the 1-1, the higher 1-1-1 not. The higher one sit, the higher. The position. The higher the position, the one had one not. The higher one sat, the more helpless he was. He was helpless and had no other way. The pros and cons were clearly placed together. Which side of the tree would be chopped down and which side of the tree would monopolize the land? The ending was clear at a glance. He still had his own loved ones and he wanted to protect them. So any friendship or secret thoughts could be put aside. What Mei Foran wanted to do with the blood from her fingertips was not a good thing. He was helping the tyrant to do evil and adding insult to injury. He turned his head and walked in another direction. People of different paths could not make plans together. He could not do anything. Could only watch with folded arms. He could only watch the tree that he had worked hard to grow in the palace fall into the mud. That big fire burned for 3 days and 3 nights. Chapter 995. In the entire imperial palace, only the cold palace was burnt to ashes. The sorrowful mood, the tearful accusation, the curses before death and the deep despair all disappeared with the fire, leaving behind only the ghastly embers and the rumors that people talked about. Ming Qi's Empress Shen died. After the Shen family was executed for treason, the crown prince was deposed and committed suicide. Mei Foran was appointed as the new crown prince and Fu Xing became the new empress. The lonely cold palace suddenly caught fire in the night and burned the deposed Empress Shen to ashes. This was a matter that made one sigh. The emperor of Ming Qi was benevolent and did not let the empress go to the netherworld because of the Shen family's disloyalty. He spared her life and only banished her to the cold palace, but this female had no fortune and died in the fire. History was written by the victors, and it was the same for the inner palace. With a change of dynasty, the traces of Empress Shen's life were completely covered up. She did not have any belongings left as they were all destroyed in the fire. There was no one left in the first household of the Shen family, and it was really the end of the family dying out. That new crown princess Empress Li changed from her previous gentle and charming temperament and became somewhat fierce. She wholeheartedly supported her own brother and coaxed Fu Xiuyi until he was docile and the court was actually controlled by her. There was some meaning of the relatives monopolizing power. There were also some officials who faintly felt that something was wrong and wanted to secretly remind the emperor, but before they could take action, because of some inexplicable reasons, they were either demoted or exiled. Pei Lang looked at everything with cold eyes, but his heart was somewhat tired. In less than half a year after Shen Miao's death, Ming Qi almost turned the heaven and earth upside down. He indeed did not see wrongly. Mei Foran and her siblings had great skills, and it was difficult to say if the Ming Qi's country would fall into Mei Foran's hands in the future. He was loyal to Fu Xiuyi and should have reminded Fu Xiuyi, but after reminding a few times to no avail, he no longer reminded and even secretly felt that he deserved it. A person's heart was the easiest to change. A wise ruler could become an incapable ruler and a loyal official could have disloyalty. Every night when Pei Lang was sleeping, he would be awakened by a pair of eyes in his dreams. That pair of eyes were black and white and there were no tears, but it made one's heart heavier than tears. Those were Shen Miao's eyes. Pei Lang used to think that what he did was right. He followed the trend of the times, seeking benefits and avoiding harm. This was his instinct, and it was also the best choice. But the longer time passed, the more he couldn't deceive himself. How was this the general trend? He obviously did not want Shen Miao to die like this. When did he start to have other feelings for Shen Miao? Pei Lang himself did not know. He was her teacher in Guangwentang. He watched as Shen Miao, an arrogant and pampered girl who did not know anything, insisted on marrying Fu Xiuyi. He watched as she entered the residence of Prince Ding and learned things that Fu Xiuyi did not like, becoming a Wangfei, Empress, and finally a deposed Empress. She was actually a little stupid but not very smart. She was a slow learner, but she had a kind of terrifying stubbornness. In the harem, she had some unnecessary kindness. Sometimes Pei Lang felt that Shen Miao was ridiculous to be willing to pay for a person, but at other times he felt envious of Fu Xiuyi. Later on, he couldn't help but pay more attention to her. Even he himself did not realize that he had to be extra patient in teaching Shen Miao's problems. But Pei Lang was an intelligent person, and intelligent people would not allow themselves to make mistakes. Thus, when he realized that he was having strange thoughts, he was determined to stop this mistake. So when Shen Miao went to the Qin country to be a hostage, it was him who suggested it. But 5 years later, Shen Miao returned and his thoughts still did not change. Chapter 996. He coldly watched as Shen Miao fought with Mei Furen in the inner palace until she was covered in injuries. He watched as her eyes dimmed and her haggard expression. Finally, when Fu Xiuyi asked him how to deal with the Shen family descendant, he said these words without thinking. Cut the weeds and remove the roots. Cut the weeds in his heart and remove the roots in his heart. But he did not expect that Fu Xiuyi would cut the weeds and remove the roots and even remove Fu Ming. Even a vicious tiger would not eat its cubs, but Fu Xiuyi could even lay his hands on his own flesh and blood. You could still use the excuse that it was an accident on the road, but Fu Ming could only use Fu Xiuyi's orders. Pei Lang remembered Shen Miao's eyes when she heard of Fu Ming's death. That pair of black and white eyes were wide open and there were no tears, but it was so miserable that one could not bear to look at it. That big fire burned for 3 days and 3 nights, but it burned Pei Lang's heart of regret. He went to find the abbot of Putua Monastery and asked how to remove the hindrance in one's heart. The abbot was an old monk and looked at him and shook his head. Heart disease needs medicine to cure. Was there any medicine for regret in this world? Pei Lang sought the eminent monk's guidance, and the monk said, "The reason why benefactor frequently dreams of old friends is because you owe them. She could not dissipate in your dreams because there is resentment that has not been resolved. Unable to reincarnate and unable to obtain liberation." Pei Lang panicked and asked if there was a solution. The monk asked in reply, "To set the past mistakes right and seek for a chance to start again. If benefactor's life is needed, is benefactor willing?" Pei Lang said, "Willing." That monk said, "Benefactor should return." Why must one return? Pei Lang was puzzled. Benefactor is willing to pay with one's life, but one need to wait for that opportunity. That opportunity? What opportunity does it refer to? Pei Lang asked. Benefactor still owes people and has an unfulfilled wish. When the old friend's wish is fulfilled, benefactor will sacrifice his own life and perhaps there would be a chance of survival. The monk said an Amitabha and said, "This is all that is said." This poor monk is unable to say more. Pei Lang thanked the monk and returned to the palace. What was Shen Miao's unfulfilled wish? Shen Miao's entire life was miserable and lonely. Most likely she wanted to see the enemy go to hell and the Shen family regain their innocence. There was a chance to start again, but one must wait. Wait or not. Pei Lang made his decision. This life was so long that he was willing to use this life to make up for a mistake. Winter passed and spring came. Wild geese came and went. When a dynasty's fate was nearing its end, the aura of decline would envelop it. Ming Qi was no longer the Ming Qi of the past. Exorbitant taxes and corvée labor. The common people had no way to make a living, corrupt officials colluded with each other, The court was in chaos, and the emperor was fatuous. The crown prince, on the other hand, was busy forming cliques all day long, wishing that he could ascend the throne as soon as possible. Taking back the military power but without a good general to drive them, Ming-Chi was a piece of fat meat that everyone wanted to take a bite of. The faraway Great Liang attacked and annexed the Qin country and finally launched an attack on Ming-Chi. Like crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood, victory came too easily as they fought all the way to the gates of the Ding capital. After setting up camp, everyone in the Ding capital felt insecure and the common people's doors were tightly shut as the atmosphere of the country's demise filled the air. In that big tent, someone was sitting and polishing a long sword. Ming-Chi's fate has come to an end. Chapter 997. Was he really trying to preserve his integrity? Among those people, how many actually didn't want to die? The man stopped wiping his sword and raised his head, revealing a peerlessly beautiful face. He had a pair of gentle peach blossom eyes, but they were filled with coldness. "Oh, has Empress Shin's body been found?" Jiyu Shu opened the door of the mosquito net and walked in. When he heard what was said, he said, "Inquired about it." "Nothing." The cold palace was burned clean and not even a piece of clothing was left. Gao Yang ridiculed, "Fu Xiu-yi is really afraid of people gossiping and handled it very neatly. It is really a pity for the Shen family." Jiyu Shu sighed. If the Shen family was here, why would he end up in such a situation? Xie Jingxing said plainly, "Only seeking one's own destruction." He took another look at the red rope in his hands. The color of the rope had faded a little, but it was still firm. Later on, he went to many battlefields, and this red rope never fell off. Xie Jingxing shook his head as he thought of the girl's words of congratulations that night. He would have to go back on his promise. Who knew that in just a few short years, the Ming-Chi's rivers and mountains would be destroyed so quickly? Even without Great Liang, it would not last long. He had indeed returned triumphantly, and he had planned to repay her wish for the sake of that cup of farewell wine and compensate her with a firework. However, he had already passed, and there was no chance for him to do so in this lifetime. He said, "Tomorrow morning attack the city." The Great Liang's flag fluttered in the wind. The sky of June changed in an instant. Black clouds pressed down on the city, the wind blew violently, as if a heavy downpour was about to arrive in the next moment. There was no one left in the palace. Corpses were strewn everywhere. There were palace ladies who hanged themselves, and there were also servants who were beheaded by the Great Liang soldiers. Blood flowed everywhere, and there were millions of corpses. Pei Lang sat in the tea hall, pouring tea for himself. He poured the table slowly. Green smoke rose from the corner of the table, emitting a fragrance. It was like the whisper of a beauty, enchanting. He glanced out the window. On the day of Xin Miao's death, it was also this kind of weather. The sky was gloomy and suddenly heavy rain poured down. He had waited for this day for a long time. The Great Liang's army had arrived and Ming-Chi's fate was about to end. Fu Xiu-yi and Mei Furen were about to reach the end of their lives and Xin Miao's wish should be fulfilled. He finally had a chance to turn back from the mistake he had made. He emptied the contents of the phial into the flagon at the other end and filled his glass. "Your wish is about to come true. Unfortunately, the one who fulfilled your dying wish was not me." On top of the city gate tower, the army was pressing down on the border. The emperor and the empress were both tied to the flagpoles with their hands tied behind their backs. Everyone had their own selfish motives. For the sake of their own survival, they could also destroy the survival of others. This was something that Mei Furen and Fu Xiu-yi often did, and now it was their turn to have a taste of it. The officials in Ming-Chi's palace kidnapped their own country's emperor and empress and came to the Great Liang to ask for surrender. They were willing to use Empress Monarch's head to beg the other party to spare their lives. When the tree falls, the monkeys scatter, and when the wall falls, everyone pushes it. No matter how favored Mei Furen was at this moment, she could not move anyone. Oh, and the new crown prince, Fu Sheng. Her head would have long been chopped off by Fu Sheng's bootlicking Xie Chong Wu and Xie Chong Chao and given to the Great Liang's general to curry favor. Under the city gate tower, the male sitting on the tall horse lazily narrowed his eyes. One did not know when the black clouds had dispersed, but gradually the golden sun shone over the entire city. His robes were gorgeous, and even though his military uniform was stained with blood, it was still untainted by a speck of dust and had a natural pressure. It formed a sharp contrast with the emperor who was tied up on top of the tower. Chapter 998. Xie Jingxing. Fu Xiuyi gritted his teeth. The heir of the residence of the Marquis of Lin and the son of Xie Ding, the brother of Xie Changwu and Xie Changchao. No one would have thought that the youth who had died in the battlefield, the youth who had declined along with the residents of the Marquis of Lin and would reappear in front of the world with this appearance after so many years. He was the blood brother of the great Liang's Emperor Yongle, the noble Prince Rui, and was also the great Liang's young marshal, commanding the Mou army which caused people to tremble with fear. Long time no see, son of the Fu family. Xie Jingxing greeted him. Everyone knew that the great Liang's Emperor Yongli's younger brother was the most glorious and fought for him under the heavens, and was the most upright and forthright. Such a heroic character was originally the heir of the residence of the Marquis of Lin, and Mei Furan stared at that man. She was extremely afraid that no matter how confident she was in victory, she would lose her sense of propriety when it came to a matter of life and death. However, she had always relied on men to get what she wanted step by step. At this juncture, all her tricks were useless. She blamed Fu Xiuyi for not having the ability and for the dynasty to be destroyed. Looking at the handsome man below the city walls, he had a natural air of nobility and could not help but stare at him. Her eyes were full of emotions. Xie Jingxing frowned and asked Jiu Shu, "Shen Miao lost to this woman?" Jiu Shu said, "Correct." She then added, "Looking at the average appearance, one really do not know if the Mingqi Emperor's eyes grew crooked." Both of their voices were not concealed, and the great Liang army roared with laughter, and Mei Furan's face flushed red with hatred. Fu Xiuyi was also angry in his heart as he looked at Xie Jingxing and said in a deep voice, "If you want to kill, then kill. Why the need to talk nonsense? Still pretending to be a man until now." Jiu Shu said in disdain, "Third older brother, this Mingqi Emperor is anxious to die." Xie Jingxing smiled lazily and said, "This prince originally did not want to kill you and was too lazy to do it personally. But I owe your little empress a wish. Coincidentally, this ending is also the ending that you prepared for me many years ago. So, whether it is public or private, I have to return it to you." He opened his hand, and Gao Yang handed over the longbow and the silver arrow. Xie Jingxing placed his hand on the bow and arrow and heard a "shio" sound. Mei Furan, who was on the tower, was hit by an arrow. However, the arrow was not aimed at his chest. It just so happened to avoid the vital parts. Blood flowed out incessantly. It was a ghastly sight. Mei Furan was in so much pain that she almost fainted, and Fu Xiuyi's calm expression also changed twice. The scariest thing in the world was not death, but waiting for it. Xie Jingxing smiled gently and spread his hands again. Gao Yang sent another 2 silver arrows. He knocked 2 arrows on the longbow and whistled. The tens of thousands of troops of the great Liang pulled their bows and aimed at the 2 of them. The flags on the platform fluttered in the wind, sounding like the wailing of ghosts. When the last of the black clouds dispersed, the golden sun covered the entire land, scorching the earth. The man's purple robe fluttered slightly in the wind. His smile was cold, but there seemed to be the mischievousness of a young man between his brows. He stood at the bottom of the city gate tower and looked at the 2 people who had panic in their eyes. He laughed heartily. "I'm sorry, little emperor. I'm indebted to a lady who entrusted me to take your dog life. Release." Tens of thousands of arrows ferociously shot towards the 2 people on the tower. It was like a ferocious beast coming out of its cage, almost covering the sky and earth. Not even a trace of the golden sun could be revealed as it swallowed the 2 of them. One could not see anything at all. In the imperial palace, that green-clad male had already fallen asleep in front of the table. Beside his feet, a lantern tilted, and the candle inside fell down. In less than a moment, the cloth curtains were set ablaze. The fire slowly spread, burning through the Zhonghua Palace, burning through the throne room, until the entire palace was enveloped in raging flames, turning everything red. Third older brother, the imperial palace is on fire. Jiu Shu looked into the distance and said in shock, "Send people to put out the fire? No need." Xie Jingxing stopped him. "This Ming Qi imperial palace is not clean. It would be good to burn it." He raised his brows, white sun flames. "I did not miss the appointment." "What is the meaning of that?" Jiu Shu did not understand. Xie Jingxing looked at the corner of the sky that was dyed red by the fire. In his eyes, there was a figure drinking alone in the bright moonlight. "This imperial court has let you down, so this prince will help you to overthrow this imperial court." He said softly, "This is most likely your wish." But he did not notice that the red rope that was firmly tied around his wrist and did not fall off for a few years suddenly broke and fell into the fire on the ground, turning into ashes. No one heard the long sigh of the female in the ashes. So this was a calamity. So this was fate. What one's eyes saw might not be true. What one's ears heard might not be true. In 2 lifetimes, he stood at the distant peak and smiled carelessly. One would only understand what kind of person he was when one was in front of him. He was cynical but the most sincere. He was full of schemes but he was loyal. He could command 1,000 troops with a cup of warm wine and could also drive a horse to the top of a building for a stranger he met by chance. He would say sorry to the emperor child that he was entrusted by a young lady to take his dog life. He lived the heaviest and most unrestrained life, the darkest and most realistic life. Born from despicableness was infinite sincerity, looking disdainfully at the world, coldly competing, and finally unhurriedly holding the chess piece in his sleeves, grasping that little bit of light in his palm. This was her question. Her question, but only he could answer it. "It is raining." Gao Yang kept his fan. "Summer is really strange." Xie Jingxing smiled. "Enter the city." "For what?" "To overthrow the imperial power." Chapter 999. Shen Miao had a very long dream. That dream seemed to be very, very long as a lifetime. She watched as a bystander watched herself from a babbling baby to a bouncing young girl, from a bouncing young girl to a slender young lady, then to a young married woman, then to the unattainable ruler of the 6 palaces in the palace, and finally to the deposed empress in the cold palace, turning into ashes in the raging fire. She watched herself fall in love with Fu Xiuyi, and begged Shen Exan to marry her to Fu Xiuyi. She sat at the side, desperately trying to stop her foolish actions, but it was futile. No one could hear her words, so she could only watch everything happen again. From a bystander's point of view, how foolish was the things that she did in the past. Shen Miao finally understood now. The most terrifying thing was to once again experience the heart-wrenching pain of the past. Her teenage years ended after she married Fu Xiuyi. Those carefree days, even if she was called stupid by others, were at the end free and happy. And when she became Ding Wangfei, she was forced to be involved in these intrigues. Even her pair of children could not escape. The people around her left one by one, and the first household of the Shen family gradually declined. The once flourishing flowers were like flowers that bloomed to the extreme in spring, but once spring passed, summer came, and when the autumn wind blew, it would wither, making it look cold and shabby. In that dark life where there was almost no light, there were some things that she had overlooked. Those things were like the stars in the dark night, covered by other things and became unreal. Accidentally discovered, bright as before. Also like the embers of fireworks that accidentally broke into one's own courtyard, with a little bright color, making that dry and cold night become fragrant. She saw Xie Jingxing. Not that stubborn youth, not that hero that died on the battlefield. He was as arrogant as he was in the future, riding a tall horse, carrying a longbow, and in the midst of talking and laughing he overturned an imperial court. He drank the farewell wine that she gave him under the bright moonlight, and on the dark day when the city was breached, he gave her a wish that she could not fulfill in her entire life. They had seen a fireworks show in the daytime, even if they hadn't broken the promise of that New Year's Eve. They were clearly strangers who met by chance, but he had become the most indispensable person in her life. Because of him, her wish was fulfilled, And because of him, she was reborn. It was just that the fate of that life was too short. Such a beautiful and anticipated fate was forced to stop because of the teasing of fate. What a pity! That was why there was a chance in this life. That short-lived fate was able to continue. All the unspoken questions seemed to no longer need to be spoken. Many things disappeared at that moment, including the questions and the answers. The karma of the past determines the outcome of the future. Shen Miao slowly opened her eyes. As far as the eye could see, it was the clear sky after the rain. An exquisite sachet was hanging in the corner of the mosquito net, probably to dilute the bitter smell of medicine. The fragrance and the smell of the herbs mixed together, creating a thought-provoking smell. Shen Miao looked up to her side. The young man leaned over the headboard, one hand still holding her hand tightly. His eyes were closed and there was a green stubble on his chin. It was not that obvious, but it was different from his usual pampered appearance. The joints of his hand were distinct, slender and warm, just enough to completely cover her hand. Shen Miao only moved slightly and Xie Jingxing woke up. Seeing that her eyes were open, Xie Jingxing was surprised for a moment, as if he had not reacted. After a pause, he suddenly said, "You are awake." Chapter 1000. Shen Miao nodded her head. "Do you feel anything wrong?" Xie Jingxing inquired. "Let Gao Yang come in for a look?" He usually had a lazy and indifferent look, as if he did not care about anything, but at this moment there was a rare look of anxiety. Shen Miao said, "No need. I am very good." She then asked, "How is Teacher Pei?" Xie Jingxing's face suddenly turned black. Shen Miao saw his face change and was stunned for a moment before understanding. She did not know how to explain. Was Pei Lang hateful? Naturally he was hateful. In the past lifetime he took her blood from her fingertips and gave it to Mei Foran. Even though she did not know if Mei Foran's changing one's fate was real or not, there were some thoughts of helping the evildoer, and that sentence of cutting the weeds and removing the roots indirectly led to Fu Ming's ending. Shen Miao's feelings towards Pei Lang were very complicated. She could ignore it for herself, but as it concerned Fu Ming, she was unable to forgive Pei Lang. But Pei Lang finally used his life to exchange for a chance for her to start over. It was unclear what kind of feeling it was. One was unable to be purely grateful or purely hate a person, so one could only draw a line in the relationship. Shen Miao did not want to be involved with Pei Lang in the relationship of owing and being owed. The matters of the past lifetime were already in the previous lifetime, but in this lifetime she did not want to owe Pei Lang anything, and also did not want to be owed by Pei Lang. She remembered very clearly that when that childlike assassin pounced over, it was Pei Lang who blocked the heaviest blow for her. If Pei Lang died because of her, then the involvement of these two lifetimes would not be clean. But looking at Xie Jingxing's expression, Shen Miao knew that he had misunderstood. When Xie Jingxing got angry because of these matters, Shen Miao inexplicably felt that he was like the little wolf dog that Luo Sui raised in the Luo family's army. She hurriedly stroked the little wolfhound's fur and said, "He saved my life, so he's my benefactor. He's not related to me, but he risked his life to save me. I can't just accept this kindness." Xie Jingxing's expression then eased up a little and said, "Gao Yang had taken a look. He woke up once last night and was really lucky." He then glanced at Shen Miao. "Why aren't you waking up? If you don't wake up, I'm going to chop off that Taoist priest's head." "Priest?" Shen Miao was startled. "Are you talking about Priest Qi Yan?" "What Taoist priest?" Xie Jingxing said in disdain. "He is just a Jianghu swindler who earns money." The so-called Taoist priest Scarlet Flame left Prince Rui's residence early in the morning. Before leaving, he took the good antique vase in the hall, saying that it was a thank-you gift. She did not know what kind of expert a Taoist priest who was always calculating money was. When Shen Miao heard Xie Jingxing say that the Taoist priest took a vase and left, she had some doubts in her heart. That long dream had solved a lot of her doubts. In fact, it was not necessarily true, but Shen Miao did not know why, but she felt that everything that happened in the dream was the complete story of her previous lifetime. That Taoist priest was indeed someone that she met on the way back to Mingqi from the Qing country. She thought that he was a refugee who escaped from the famine and disguised himself as a Taoist priest to earn a living. She was after all Shen Xian's daughter and was somewhat generous in her heart. She gave the other a bowl of water but did not think that it would implicate so many things. If she really listened to that Taoist priest in her previous lifetime and did not step on the road back to the Ding capital, most likely there would not be those tragedies later on. But if she were to do it all over again, even though she knew that it was a road of no return, she would not have any other choice because her pair of children were in the palace. But that Taoist priest at the end completed a portion of fate. Chapter 1001. Shen Miao remembered it very clearly. In the dream, her corpse was burnt to ashes by the fire that Fu Xiuyi ordered people to light, and nothing was left. However, that resentment was extremely heavy and refused to dissipate. Mei Furan ordered people to perform the ritual. She could not become a malicious spirit and was unable to reincarnate, so her soul was imprisoned in the palace walls and wandered around all day, becoming weaker by the day. All the things that she left behind were burnt, and if it was not for the red rope in Xie Jingxing's hand, she would have long dissipated from heaven and earth. That red rope could save her from some troubles. Those days where she was unable to reincarnate, Shen Miao's spirit rested in the red rope on Xie Jingxing's wrist and lived in a muddle. Until the day the city was breached. She saw Fu Xing die in the hands of his own people, she saw Mei Furan and Fu Xiuyi being tied up on the city walls, she saw both of them being killed by thousands of arrows piercing through their hearts, she saw the palaces that she hated for her entire life being burnt to the ground and turned into ashes. The unfulfilled wish in her heart, the soul that was not willing to disperse, finally obtained complete peace at that moment. The red rope was broken and she could let it go. Thus time reversed and Pei Lang used his life as the price for her to be reborn. Xie Jingxing saw that Shen Miao did not speak and asked with a frown, "What is the matter with you?" Shen Miao recovered to her senses and looked at him without speaking. She was somewhat agitated. She was just thinking that in the past life she had no interaction with Xie Jingxing, so how could they be tied together in this life by a freak combination of factors that could not be pulled apart? So it was because of the involvement in the past life. In the beginning, when Xie Jingxing owed her a wish, it was just a joke. She did not think that he would keep his promise and personally kill Fu Xiuyi and take revenge for her. She softly asked, "Xie Jingxing, what wish do you have?" Xie Jingxing glanced at her. "Why? You want to complete it for me?" "I can give you a wish," she said seriously. "As long as I am able to complete it, I will do my best." Her expression was too solemn that it made Xie Jingxing slightly glance at her. In just a moment, his lips curled up and said with a smile that was not a smile, "All right." He then leaned close to Shen Miao's ear and whispered, "My wish? You will definitely be able to do it." Shen Miao asked, "What is it?" "Give me a child," he said nonchalantly. Shen Miao looked at him for a while. Xie Jingxing touched his nose and was about to speak when he heard Shen Miao answer, "All right." Xie Jingxing was startled. Shen Miao stared at him with a slight smile on her lips. It was different from the past. It was not the kind of smile that had to be held back. Instead, it was a smile that came from the bottom of her heart, as if she was truly happy. There was even a hint of gentleness in it. Xie Jingxing subconsciously reached out to touch her forehead and said, "You really have not recovered from your illness." Shen Miao pushed his hand away and said, "Xie Jingxing, on the day of my birthday, you must have been frightened." Xie Jingxing released his hand and saw that her expression was calm and there was nothing strange about it, so he was slightly relieved and followed along with her words, "What do you think?" He trailed off. Even now when he recalled that scene, Xie Jingxing could not help but feel a lingering fear. Shen Miao was lying in a pool of blood with an unconscious appearance, as if she would never wake up again. His heart was also gripped at the same time, as if it was the first time he brought the Xie family army to the battlefield in the northern Jiang. Even when he was plotted against and his life and death was unknown, there was no fear in his eyes. He also had things that he was afraid of, people that he was afraid of losing, and weaknesses. And these three things happened to be the same, which was this person in front of him. "Let me make amends." Shen Miao said, Isn't your birthday already passed a long time ago? How about taking today as making up for it? Chapter 1002. Xie Jingxing looked at her inexplicably and said, "Understood. Your body is not well, so stop tormenting. It is only a flesh wound." Shen Miao took the initiative to say, "Let's go out." She was somewhat abnormal after she woke up today. Firstly, Shen Miao was not a playful person, and secondly, she seemed to be much more amiable than before. Her previous temperament was somewhat prideful, and even though one did not know why she was habitually putting on airs, Shen Miao was a person with strong self-esteem, otherwise she would not have a cold war with Xie Jingxing for so long. Xie Jingxing was very surprised that she took the initiative to please him. He narrowed his eyes and asked, "Did you do something wrong to me behind my back?" Shen Miao nodded her head seriously. "Is it related to Pei Lang?" Xie Jingxing's face turned cold. Shen Miao took a deep breath. She felt that Xie Jingxing's conduct could not be spoilt as his thoughts had deviated to such an extent. She then regained her usual expression and asked, "Are you going or not?" Xie Jingxing had not even opened his mouth when he heard a voice from behind, "Go." Gao Yang walked in and looked at Shen Miao. "Heard that you are awake, so came over to take a look. That injury was only a flesh wound and did not reach inside, so it is nothing much." He then said to Xie Jingxing, "You should also go out and exercise your muscles and bones. These days you have been staying in the house and did not go out to bask in the sun. The weather is not bad, so do not return too late." He then carried the medical box in the house and left. Xie Jingxing and Shen Miao were silent, facing each other. After a moment, Xie Jingxing smiled. "What do you want to play?" "Since I came here, I have not gone out for a stroll." Shen Miao said, "I am not that familiar with Long Yi. You and I will just casually walk around and talk to me about the matters here." Shen Miao suddenly thought of something and said, "Oh right, that day I was in the pavilion outside of Baishao Lu and let Ba Anis buy a lot of fireworks. Most likely they are still there, so bring that as well." "Why are you looking at fireworks in broad daylight?" Xie Jingxing stared at her. "Is your brain also injured?" Shen Miao asked in reply, "Have you seen fireworks in broad daylight?" Xie Jingxing said, "Who is foolish to see it before? I have seen it before." Shen Miao answered. Xie Jingxing stared at her in confusion. "The fireworks at night are beautiful, and the ones in the day might not be inferior. Since you have not seen it before, I will bring you to see it." Shen Miao smiled slightly and was about to get off the bed. However, she had been lying in bed for the past few days, and her legs and feet were very sore. Now that she was down, the pain made her gasp. When Xie Jingxing saw this, he stood up with a smile. He crossed his arms and looked at her as if he was watching a good show. "Do you want me to help you? Will you?" Shen Miao saw his expression and knew that he did not have any good intentions. Xie Jingxing said, "Beg me and I will help you." He leaned over, as if he wanted to listen carefully to Shen Miao's soft words. Shen Miao felt that Xie Jingxing's character was really hard to fathom. He was clearly strong and somewhat overbearing, and in his youth, he already had schemes and calculations that an adult would not be able to match. But right now, he was like a mischievous youth who never got tired of teasing others. She stared at Xie Jingxing's handsome face and suddenly had an idea. With a "pa" sound, she kissed Xie Jingxing's cheek. Xie Jingxing was stunned. Shen Miao moved her gaze away and looked at the sachet hanging at the head of the bed. "Shen Miao." Xie Jingxing frowned as he looked at her. "Your illness is not light. You need to let Gao Yang come and take a look." Making a posture to leave, Shen Miao anxiously shouted at him, "Xie Jingxing." His footsteps paused, and when he turned his head back, he had a mischievous look on his face. Shen Miao knew that she was fooled and felt regret in her heart, but she saw Xie Jingxing laughing out loud and suddenly walked forward to carry her up. Shen Miao subconsciously hooked her arms around his neck. Chapter 1003. Xie Jingxing carried her out just like that, causing the servants in the residence of Prince Rui to look at both of them. In Shen Miao's previous and current life, she had never been so close to a male. No matter if it was in the residence of Prince Ding or the inner palace, She had to put on the airs of an empress. But even Mei Foran did not seem to be carried by Fu Xiu-yi in front of so many people. If that was really the case, then the title of a fatuous ruler and femme fatale would not be able to escape. Could it be that she was a dignified and virtuous empress in her previous life, and in this life she had to bear the title of femme fatale? Xie Jingxing was rather like a fatuous ruler. Shen Miao's imagination ran wild as her eyes swept across those servants who were covering their mouths and sniggering. She was annoyed in her heart and pinched Xie Jingxing. "What are you doing? Quickly put me down." "'Tis K. No to be shy?" Xie Jingxing raised his eyebrows and his tone was so bad that it made one want to beat him up. He said, "Just now one do not know who was the one who insulted my innocence in broad daylight." Even words like insulting innocence were used. Shen Miao could only try hard to calm her emotions. But she saw Luo Tan walking over. Most likely Luo Tan did not think that she would encounter such a scene. Even though she usually had a big heart, she was after all a young female and felt somewhat uncomfortable. Shen Miao let Xie Jingxing put her down and Luo Tan did not know where to place her eyes. Shen Miao asked her, "It has been hard on you these days." "Not at all. Not at all." Luo Tan waved her hands repeatedly and was a little afraid when she saw Xie Jingxing at the side. At that time she wholeheartedly wanted to vent Shen Miao's anger and threw a fit at Xie Jingxing, but later on she regretted it. The other party had a high position and was even the great Liang's Prince Rui. If he were to vent his anger on Shen Miao, then her sin would be big. But seeing Shen Miao and Xie Jingxing being so intimate, it seemed that there was no quarrel and her heart could not help but feel gratified. Right. Luo Tan suddenly thought of something and took something out from her sleeves and placed it in Shen Miao's hands. "This is what Taoist priest Qi Yan gave to me before he left, and let me pass it to you, saying that it is for your parting room." It was a small wooden box with a chicken and a snake carved on it. Luo Tan said, "One do not know why there is a chicken and a snake." "Shen Miao," she said, "this is a dragon and phoenix." Priest Qi Yan's carving skills were really not flattering. If Shen Miao did not understand, one would not be able to tell that it was a dragon and a phoenix. Luo Tan choked as Shen Miao opened the wooden box and took out 2 red ropes from it. "This," Luo Tan said, "these are just 2 red ropes, what's so special about it?" "You still said it was strange and strange, I thought it was something valuable. This Taoist priest is really stingy. He clearly has a whole valley of medicinal herbs, but he wants to give this." Shen Miao stared at the rope and her eyes wavered. In her past life, she had obtained a rope from a Taoist priest. That rope had accompanied her for many years. Later on, it passed through many hands and fell into the hands of Xie Jingxing. Her fragrant soul had once rested in the red string, and it was also the medium that connected her and Xie Jingxing's fate in her previous life. Suddenly, he felt that the red string was somewhat familiar. She stretched out her hands and tied the red string on her hands. Luo Tan looked at her actions and said in shock, "Biao, youngest sister, you are not going to wear this?" Shen Miao looked at the red string on her hands with satisfaction and picked up another one before saying to Xie Jingxing, "Stretch out your hand." Xie Jingxing said, "I do not wear." "Stretch out your hand." Shen Miao repeated. Xie Jingxing looked at her incredulously, "I am a male. This can ensure safety." Shen Miao casually made up, "You wear this with me. If you are in danger, I will know, and if I am in danger, you will also be able to feel it." Chapter 1004. Luo Tan stood at the side and weakly asked, "Is it really so godly?" Shen Miao did not care if it was godly or not. She felt that priest Qi Yan was very capable and the things that he sent should be very precious. Even if it was as Luo Tan said, these were just 2 ordinary ropes and this thing had a deep meaning to her. It was more memorable than those gold and silver. When Xie Jingxing heard it, he did not refuse anymore. Even though his eyes were still filled with disgust, he still allowed Shen Miao to put the red rope on his hand and at the end, he tied a knot with it. Luo Tan looked at it and bared her teeth. Xie Jingxing was a dignified man, the elegant and noble Prince Rui, but he was wearing such a thing on his hand. It was really not a beautiful picture. Forget about the femininity, The most important thing was that this red rope did not look very valuable. Compared to both of their brocade clothes, it really paled in comparison and was out of place. Shen Miao said, "It is done." Xie Jingxing quickly retracted his hand and quietly moved his sleeves inwards, trying to block the conspicuous red color. Luo Tan said, "All right. The things have been sent over, and seeing that you all seem to have something on, I will not disturb and leave first." Then he winked at Shen Miao and dragged out his voice, "Biao youngest sister is so good, I am relieved." He ran away like a wisp of smoke. "Shen Miao," Xie Jingxing said, Go and watch the fireworks." The servants of Prince Rui residence, Song Yang softly asked Tai Yi, "The one who is ill is foreign, why does Master's brain seem to have a problem? Why are you looking at fireworks in broad daylight?" Tai Yi expressionlessly handed the broom to him, "Sweep the floor." In Wei Yang Palace, Empress Yenda was leaning on the couch reading a book. She was reading leisurely as she listened to the palace maids talking. Putting down the book in her hands, she said with some relief on her face, "It is good that nothing is wrong. These days there are so many incidents that Ben Gong had planned to burn incense and pray." The matter of Shen Miao being assassinated was hidden from outsiders, but it was not hidden from Emperor Yonglu and Empress Xianda. Even Gao Yang was helpless, so the imperial physicians in the palace were even more helpless. Speaking of which, these days it was really strange. Incidents happened to the residence of Prince Rui one after another. First it was Xie Jingxing. Xie Jingxing had just escaped a calamity, and now it happened to Shen Miao. Fortunately, now that Shen Miao had woken up, it made one's heart to be relieved. Empress Xianda put down the book. She was no longer in the mood to read. She stood up and walked to the window. It had rained last night, and today was a fine day. There was no trace of the gale from last night, except for the plum tree by the window, whose branches and leaves were blown to the ground by the wind and rain. She muttered to herself, "Long Yi is not peaceful either." The wind forebodes the coming storm. Ever since Xie Jingxing returned to the Great Liang, there had been 2 incidents in the residence of Prince Rui, and this was a kind of signal. Perhaps it was a warning or a counterattack, because Emperor Yonglu had already begun to act against the Lu family. Tao Gugu was a female official by Empress Xianda's side. Ever since Empress Xianda was made Empress, she had been following by her side. After so many years, she was Empress Xianda's most loyal confidant. Tao Gugu said, "Today Consort Jing went to the imperial study to look for His Majesty. When she went, her eyes were full of tears, and when she came out, it seemed that she was not in a good mood." The palace maids of Jinhua Palace said that after returning, Consort Jing punished a number of servants and smashed a lot of things. It seemed that her mood was not good. Empress Xianda smiled gently. The Lu family had suffered a loss and wanted to test His Majesty's attitude, so naturally they would start from Consort Jing. Did not Lu Foreign enter the palace to see Consort Jing a few days ago? His Majesty seemed to no longer have patience with Consort Jing. Tao Gugu said, "Consort Jing has been restraining herself a lot with you these few days. If His Majesty really take action against the Lu family, on Consort Jing's end, what do you think? Leave it all to His Majesty to decide." Empress Xianda said lightly, "Whether it is sincere or fake, in Ben Gong's eyes, one would not be able to see these clearly. Since I entered the palace in the beginning, I know these truths." She looked at Tao Gugu, who had a face full of worry, and smiled instead. "You wouldn't think that Ben Gong would care about these things?" Tao Gugu didn't speak. Empress Xianda looked outside again and said, "Ever since Ben Gong became the Empress, Ben Gong did not think of herself as a woman. The wife of an emperor is not a wife, but someone who will shoulder the world with him. Fortune and disaster depend on each other, life and death together. Ben Gong has never been afraid. Ben Gong is just slightly regretful." She looked at her stomach. "Ben Gong was not able to give birth to my own child. In the past, if it wasn't for Consort Jing..." Tao Gugu gritted her teeth, her tone filled with anger and unwillingness, and also the pain of not being resolved. "Never mind," Empress Xianda tiredly waved her hand. She smiled, but that smile was somewhat numb and desolate. "It's the same without Consort Jing. This child Ben Gong will not be able to give birth." She said softly, Look at the Hogong who gave birth to his child? None. It's impossible. So even though Ben Gong is regretful, all the women in the Hogong are regretful. Ben Gong's regret is not regret. At least, Ben Gong still has this position that cannot be shaken, she said. Chapter 1005. As the sun turned to the west, Shen Miao and Xie Jingxing were on their way back to the residence. The Great Liang was more open and free than Ming Qi, and it was a common thing for husband and wife to go out together. But because Xie Jingxing was too famous, almost everyone in Longyi knew him, and wherever he went, he would be surrounded by astonished gazes. Some days ago there were rumors that Princess Rui and His Highness the Prince of First Rank appeared to be united but were actually separated, and their relationship was as cold as ice. Now that both of them were traveling hand in hand, this rumor was dispelled. If it was really like the rumors that both of them were unfamiliar with each other, why would they travel so intimately? One did not know which family's mouth was speaking nonsense. Ever since Shen Miao came to Longyi, this was the first time she came out for a stroll. Xie Jingxing was very familiar with this place and bought as she walked. She was not a greedy person, but today it was as if she was affected by Luo Tan as she bought a carriage full of big and small things. Both of them bought in front while Tai Yi and Song Yang paid at the back. Even so, Xie Jingxing still felt that Shen Miao was somewhat strange and looked suspiciously at her from time to time along the way. Shen Miao, however, felt that her mood was unprecedentedly relaxed. It was as if after that dream, all the unwillingness, resentment, anger, and hatred in her previous lifetime had been unraveled. Vengeance was still needed. However, in this new life, it wasn't just about vengeance. Those stars that shone in the dark years made her feel that there were not only bad things left behind in her previous lifetime. For this new life, it was even more precious. The current her was braver, more determined, and more frank than before. They could face their feelings openly, and they could also passionately embrace a brand new life. After all, this her was a completely different person from that one. She was in such a relaxed mood and had a smile on her face from the beginning to the end. Like a child looking at these things with novel eyes, she even said to Xie Jingxing, Longyi and Ding Capital are indeed different. One think that the various places in the Great Liang have their own customs. If there is a day that one is able to travel to famous mountains and great rivers and see different sceneries, that would be good. Xie Jingxing smiled. What is so difficult about that? It is easier to say than to do. Shen Miao said, sometimes one is envious of those uncultivated people in the pugilistic world. They are carefree and without any worldly affairs and live a very exciting life. Xie Jingxing looked at her thoughtfully. Shen Miao said, why are you looking at me? His lips hooked up as he held Shen Miao's hands and smiled. After the matters of Ming Qi and the Great Liang are settled, I will bring you to wherever you want to go. Shen Miao smiled at him. This is you returning my wish? Xie Jingxing was slightly stunned. Thinking of the wish that Shen Miao had mentioned when she woke up, a malicious smile suddenly appeared on his face. He hooked his lips and said, you have been reminding me of that wish today. Is it because 2 months have passed and you really want to? Shen Miao turned and walked away. I am not thinking about anything. Song Yang and Tai Yi followed behind. Song Yang's expression was awkward, and Tai Yi's tanned face was flushed red. The two of them could not bear to watch. It was naturally a good thing that the relationship between the masters was good, but to let the two of them serve in front of him was simply abuse. He might as well go guard the tower prison. When the moon gradually rose, there were fewer people on the streets. Shen Miao and Xie Jingxing had also strolled for a day and felt somewhat tired. It was rare for her to be in high spirits today, so Xie Jingxing accompanied her. Chapter 1006. Shen Miao complied. The bath water was very warm and it was so comfortable that it made one drowsy and sleepy. She lay on the bed and Guyu was attending to her side as she said, this servant has not seen Furen smile like this for a long time. Shen Miao recovered to her senses. In fact, she often smiled. It was probably because she had stayed in the harem for a long time in her previous life that she understood the principle of not losing even if she lost. No matter how gloomy the road ahead was or how disadvantageous the situation was for her, she would subconsciously put on a smile first. When the enemy saw your smile, they would not be able to figure out what you were thinking in your heart. Even if one could not confuse the enemy, it was also good to disgust the other party. Since her rebirth, she was used to this kind of appearance, but that smile was subconsciously brought out and was not sincere. How could it be the same with a smile that came from the heart? Now her eyes were curved as if they were filled with slight satisfaction. Like a warm jade, it made her delicate and beautiful face look even more charming, making one unable to move their eyes away. Jingzhe noticed the red string on Shenmiao's wrist. When Luo Tan gave Shenmiao the red string, Jingzhe did not know about it. Thus, when she saw it now, she was very curious. "Furen, is this red string newly bought from the streets? It is somewhat unique, but it does not match well with the clothes." Guyu also saw it and smiled. Previously, Pu-Tu monasteries sold this kind of red string. 1 copper coin for 5 strings, and said that it can be used to pray for marriage. Jingzhe smiled. 5 marriages only worth 1 copper coin. It is really too cheap. She also felt somewhat strange. Does not Furen not believe in these things the most? Why did you buy it? But speaking of which, if His Highness saw this string, one fear that he would not be happy and would think that Furen is already a Qinhuang Fei, so what marriage is there to pray for? Jingzhe had a lively temperament, and at this moment she imitated Xie Jingxing's unhappy expression to speak, making Shenmiao and Guyu laugh out loud. Guyu laughed and scolded, "Mischievous ghost. Is His Highness someone that you can make fun of?" Shenmiao waved her hands and said, "Later let people place the dishes in Xie Jingxing's room." Both of them had always slept in separate rooms, as Xie Jingxing had his own bedroom. Jingzhe was surprised for a moment before smiling. Furen wants to eat with His Highness. She could not help but feel happy for Shenmiao. These maids saw that Shenmiao and Xie Jingxing slept in separate rooms but did not know how to persuade them. Who would have thought that after this calamity, their relationship would advance by leaps and bounds? It was a blessing in disguise. Shenmiao said, "This rope is very agile." Guyu looked at Shenmiao in surprise, as she did not know why she would suddenly say such words. Shenmiao looked at the rope and sighed softly. But this time, her eyes were relaxed. This day was bound to come. Unlike the previous times when she was worried about gains and losses, this time she was fully prepared. Everything in this life was different from her previous life, including people and things. Therefore, she was still full of expectations for the future, but she would not bet all her future on one person. Grow by yourself, become someone who could stand shoulder to shoulder with the person you love, become equally powerful, protect the things you want to protect, and understand the feud you should understand. It was that simple. She let Jingzhe bring a handkerchief and said, "Help me to twist my hair." Xie Jingxing put on his inner clothes and walked out. He had bathed for a long time and the water was somewhat cold. When he was alone, there was no lazy smile on his face, but rather a somewhat cold expression that could not be seen clearly in the night. He was actually not a very passionate person, and under his cynical appearance, there was only a disdain towards the affairs of the world. Chapter 1007. When he went out, he saw a few exquisite dishes and snacks in the middle of the room. Xie Jingxing frowned. Tai Yi. He was not used to eating in the room, as he was a person who loved cleanliness and was very orderly in private. The bedroom was a place to sleep, and meals must be eaten in the hall. After calling out a few times, there was no response. Suddenly the door opened and it was Shenmiao carrying a wine jar in. That wine jar was very big and she was swaying as she carried it. Xie Jingxing went forward to catch it and placed it on the table before asking, "What are you doing?" Shenmiao said, "I searched for a long time in your storeroom and found this jar. After smelling it, I estimated that it was 10 provinces incense and estimated that it was quite old, so I carried it out." Xie Jingxing paused and opened the wine jar. Indeed, a mellow and sweet smell of the wine hit his face. He smiled instead. "Amazing. You also know about 10 provinces incense, and Uncle Tang actually did not stop you?" 10 provinces incense was a top-quality wine and there was a price but no market. Even if one had more money, it would be hard to buy. There were only 3 jars in the entire residence of Prince Ray, and Shen Miao carried 1 jar. Coincidentally, this jar was 50 years old. One feared that Uncle Tang would cry silently with heartache. Shen Miao smiled. I have drunk it before. Xie Jingxing was suspicious. Drunk it before? Shen Miao did not speak anymore. When she was the Empress, what kind of good wine had she not drunk in the palace banquets? Even though a jar of 10 provinces incense was precious, it was not to the extent that she would look at it differently. But one did not know that she had been the Empress before and was dazzled by the dazzling lineup of things in the palace. Even if she looked at it again, she would not care about it. But in an ordinary family, even in an official's family, some officials would not have the chance to drink a mouthful of 10 provinces incense in their entire life. Shen Miao patted her head, seems to have forgotten to bring the wine cup. Her eyes glanced at the bowls that were used to hold the rice and simply scooped 2 bowls full. Xie Jingxing looked at her incredulously and asked, Shen Miao, are you an alcoholic? I will accompany you to eat. Shen Miao said, how can there be no wine when there are dishes? Xie Jingxing crossed his arms and looked at her for a while. Suddenly, he remembered something and said, if you didn't mention it, I almost forgot. That day at Azure Heaven restaurant, you drank a bowl of wine in front of so many people. Shen Jiao, you have to be careful in the future. When she was drinking, she was tender and charming, elegant and heroic. That moment of amorous feelings made others unable to take their eyes off her. Many of the men in Bai Xiaolu's eyes were glued to her body, and at that time Xie Jingxing was very angry. If he did not care about his identity, he would have carried Shen Miao on his body and left. He patiently instructed his wife, in the future, don't drink outside. If you want to drink, you must have me present. Even if I'm present, you can't drink too much, especially not in front of other people. Shen Jiao, are you listening to me? Shen Miao put down the bowl, and she had just swallowed a big mouthful of 10 provinces fragrance. The fragrance of the wine was sweet, but when it entered her throat, it was so spicy that tears almost came out. As soon as she swallowed it, she felt warm and refreshed. She exclaimed in admiration, it's worthy of being called the 10 prefectures fragrance. Xie Jingxing said, are you ignoring me now? Shen Miao glanced at him, you are not drinking? Then she picked up the bowl and drank another mouthful. Xie Jingxing said, hey, are you going to be a drunkard here tonight and drink till you are dead drunk? The 10 prefectures fragrance should not be drunk like you. You are like a cow chewing on peonies. Shen Miao glanced at him. No one dared to say that I am a cow chewing on peonies. Xie Jingxing, he always felt that every time Shen Miao finished drinking, she would be like a different person. For example, many years ago when the Shen family left the Ding capital and he headed to the northern Jiang. Could it be that there was a person living in Shen Miao's stomach, and as long as she drank, that person would be released? Xie Jingxing was really puzzled after much thought. Normally she looked like a restrained and cautious person, but once drunk, not to mention that she would not be rational, she would do unimaginable things. Chapter 1008. One felt that the heroic spirit of the Shen family could only be reflected in Shen Miao after she had drunk wine. The reason why 10 provinces incense was called 10 provinces incense was because it was mellow, and the more mellow it was, the stronger it was. Shen Miao handed that big bowl of wine to Xie Jingxing and said, you also drink. Xie Jingxing looked at her inexplicably, but Shen Miao stubbornly stretched out her hand. He could only sit down in front of the table and took that night's wine before slowly sipping it. Shen Miao looked at him. When Xie Jingxing drank, he was indeed not like a cow chewing on peonies like her, but he was also not genteel and careful, but had a kind of unrestrained heroism. As she watched, she picked up the bowl and gulped it down in one go. Xie Jingxing only drank a few mouthfuls when he saw Shen Miao turning the bowl upside down and wiping her mouth, just like how Shen Xian was drinking with the soldiers in the tent. He said, you have finished drinking? Shen Miao lightly coughed twice. I have something to tell you. Xie Jingxing swept a glance at her and then looked at the bright amber wine in his bowl. You need to drink before you dare to speak to me. Did you make a mistake behind my back? Previously, did you not ask me what is my secret? Shen Miao said, There is no need to use your secret to exchange. I will tell you. Xie Jingxing's action of holding the wine bowl paused and looked up at her. Do you want to hear? She still asked him. Xie Jingxing put down the wine bowl and said, Why do I hear that you want to set a trap for me? Then I will take it that you want to know and I will tell you. Shen Miao ignored his words and spoke on her own. Do you feel that ever since you knew me, it was very strange? The things that I said to Su Minglang and also the matter with Prince Yu. It seemed that the existence of the Feng Xian pawnshop was long known and also the second and third household of the Shen family. You still find it strange why I always targeted Prince Ding. It was obvious that before that I was in love with Prince Ding, so it is not justifiable if love turned into hatred. One by one, she said all the things that Xie Jingxing was suspicious of. Shen Miao said, In the beginning, you must have been wary of me, so you ordered people to investigate me in private. Xie Jingxing's face showed some uneasiness. Obviously, it was like what Shen Miao said, he had ordered people to investigate Shen Miao's background. You must not have found out anything. You still think that there is someone with great means behind me. Or perhaps it is because there is someone behind the Shen family. Xie Jingxing was silent. Jiyu Shu's Feng Xian pawnshop was able to find out many unknown secrets, but to Shen Miao, it was like a stone without an exit, and no matter how one tried, one could not find any place to start. Although you can't find out anything about me, you must have investigated everything I've experienced over the years. You should also know that before my father and mother returned to the Ding capital at the end of the 68th year of Ming Qi, I once fell into the water because of Prince Ding. Ever since I fell into the water, my personality seemed to have changed a little. For example, I used to be infatuated with Prince Ding, but after that, I no longer showed any feelings towards Prince Ding. A hint of displeasure flashed across Xie Jingxing's eyes. Regarding the matter of Shen Miao being in love with Fu Xiuyi, it really puzzled him. If it was not that the entire city knew about it, he would almost think that it was Shen Miao's act. In terms of looks, talent, or status, even though Fu Xiuyi was outstanding, he was not at the top of the world. Shen Miao could actually love Fu Xiuyi to the point of being infatuated, which made him speechless and also made him feel somewhat humiliated. No matter what, to compare him with Fu Xiuyi, that kind of hypocritical fellow, it really made him lower his value. Chapter 1009. After that time I fell into the water, I started to feel estranged from the second and third household of the Shen family and was not as friendly to Shen Qing and Shen Yu as before, to the extent that I would go against old Shen Furen. Shen Miao said, Do you find it strange? Xie Jingxing said, There will always be a time when one is awake. Previously Shen Miao was confused, but that was because she was young, and when she was confused to a certain point, perhaps one would know the truth from a certain matter or something else, thus one could grow up overnight. Just like himself. Shen Miao shook her head. Then I was too thoroughly awake. Actually, it is very simple. I fell into the water in the 68th year of Ming Qi and was lying on the sickbed unable to wake up for a long time. I had a very long dream. She looked at the flickering light on the table and her eyes gradually had a misty look. That dream was very long and serious, as if I had personally experienced it. Can you believe that kind of dream? Shen Miao smiled. It was like a prophecy. Xie Jingxing gradually frowned and his gaze on Shen Miao became sharp. It was rumored that there was once a governor of the southern country who was sitting under a tree and dozed off. He dreamt that he was an emperor, and from being surrounded by flowers to dying in the mud, he lived a long life. When he suddenly woke up, he discovered that it was only for a moment and that everything in that dream was just a golden millet dream. It was just that it was real, thus one could not differentiate if that dream was real or if reality was real. This dream of mine was even longer and more bitter than the governor of the southern country in the story. I dreamt of the future. She said, I dreamt that I finally married into the residence of Prince Ding and the Shen family was tied together with the residence of Prince Ding. I dreamt that there would be disputes in the court, turmoil among the princes and princes would fight for the throne, and at the end Fu Xiuyi would be the winner. He ascended the throne and I would be the Empress, being the mother of the world, and it was very glorious. Xie Jingxing's eyebrows raised. You most likely think that this is a beautiful dream of mine because I was infatuated with Fu Xiu-yi, so the dream had such a happy ending. I also hope that this is a beautiful dream, but it was the most terrible nightmare that I have ever had in my life. I gave birth to a son and a daughter, and they were the most sensible and adorable children in the world. Afterwards, the great Liang's power became stronger and there were foreign invasions in Mingqi. Mingqi borrowed troops from the Qin country, and the Qin country used me as a hostage to stay in the Qin country for 5 years. I met Huangfu Hao and Ming, and Xie Jingxing's expression gradually became serious. I don't like the royal family of the Qin kingdom. They always humiliate me. They invented a kind of shooting on foot. They let me hold a fruit on my head, but they always deliberately miss. Afterwards, I secretly practiced archery, but no matter how well I practiced, I couldn't hit them the next day. 5 years passed quickly and I returned to Mingqi. There is an additional favored concubine in the Ding capital palace, called Mei Furen. She gave birth to a son called Fu Sheng. Fu Xiu-yi dotes on Mei Furen and dotes on Fu Sheng. I was left out in the cold. Even though I was the Empress, I was laughed at in secret. Fu Xiu-yi started to attack the Shen family, and even though I am anxious, I am unable to interfere in politics. My eldest brother's career was ruined because he tarnished Jing Chuchu's innocence and was imprisoned because of murder. Finally, he became disabled and drowned in the pond. My mother's illness worsened because of Tsang Zaiqing and died of depression. My father was getting old day by day. His military power was taken away, and he drank all day. The second and third household rose up step by step and gained more power. Mei Furen and I fought in the inner palace, and no one could spare the other. It was not that I coveted the position of Empress, but if I could not even keep this position, I would not be able to keep my own children. At the end I was defeated and the Shen family perished. Wan Yu died of illness on the way to the Xiongnu, and Fu Ming also committed suicide after he was deposed from the crown prince position. I was given a white silk in the cold palace, and the eunuchs personally strangled me to death. I opened my eyes and found myself lying on the bed. It turned out that I had a very long nightmare. Chapter 10:10. She lightly narrated this shocking dream, but there was a smile on her face. This smile was somewhat misty, as if it contained endless suffering, but the suffering could not be spoken out, so one might as well use a smile to replace it. Xie Jingxing did not speak. After she was drunk, she would always call herself Ben Gong, and Xie Jingxing would always laugh at her young age for scheming so deep. Occasionally he would also feel strange as to why in her dreams she would always be a neglected and crippled empress. So it was, Shen Miao said, "Do you believe in this dream of mine?" Xie Jingxing asked back, "Do you believe?" Shen Miao laughed. "If I do not believe, one fear that standing in front of you today would only be a grave." After I woke up, I was afraid that everything in this dream would happen and lived according to the rules, trying to find some clues to prove that it was just a nightmare. However, the more seriously I pursued, the more I discovered that it was not just a dream. Those things in the dream were happening one by one. I reminded Su Minglang because the Su family would be destroyed not long after because of the emperor's fear. Everyone in the Su family would be beheaded, and only you went to collect the corpses of the father and son. After the Su family, it would be the Shen family's turn. I was only trying to protect myself, so I went to remind the Su family but did not want to be discovered by you. At that time, Xie Jingxing had doubts about her because of Su Minglang's words and repeatedly probed. Both of them clashed many times but were unable to understand each other's thoughts. Then in that dream of yours, what was my ending? Xie Jingxing stared at her and asked. Shen Miao said, "You are very good." The Xie family gradually declined and the Marquis of Lin and died in battle. You replaced your father to fight again, and one heard that you were buried on the battlefield, but after many years, you returned to Mingqi with the identity of Prince Rui. Shen Miao smiled gently, then you led the troops and horses to overthrow the imperial power. Xie Jingxing frowned. Just like that? Just like that? Shen Miao nodded her head. Like that? He raised his eyebrows. I thought that in your dream, you and I would have some involvement. You're treating it as a dream, aren't you? Or perhaps they thought that I was drunk and was talking nonsense. Shen Miao's eyes dimmed and said, but this is also very good. I would rather it was just a dream. You may not believe some things when I say it, but I did indeed dream of Jing Chu Chu, Chang Zhao Qing and the rest. I had never seen them before. Because of the nightmare, I had been wary of them even before that. Now that I think about it, a lot of things were only possible because of that dream. Xie Jingxing looked at her and smiled. That smile was gentle and comforting. You did very well. Let bygones be bygones. In any case, I tried my best to avoid the ending of the dream. But one thing is, the two children in the dream are gone. Xie Jingxing's fingers that were rubbing the wine bowl paused for a moment before saying, we will also have children. Shen Miao took a deep breath and looked at him. Now you have to listen clearly to what I am going to say. In that dream, Mei Furen, who fought with me for a lifetime, the consort mother of the new crown prince, and finally the woman who almost controlled the court's politics, was called Li Mei. She was the daughter of an official that Fu Xiuyi met during the Eastern expedition. She was gentle and charming and good at reading people's hearts. Now I see her again. Do you find it strange that when you came out from the imperial hunting grounds, I treated you coldly after I woke up because at that time I was very flustered? I saw Li Mei again. She is now called Yi Mei. Do you understand what I mean by saying it like this? She asked. Xie Jingxing did not speak for a long time. One did not know how much time had passed before he looked at Shen Miao. She is the enemy in your dream? I hated her to the bones for my entire life but was unable to kill the enemy with my own hands. Meeting again in this lifetime, she had become the daughter that the Long Yi family had found. Xie Jingxing, I can endure my hatred, but there is one point. Yi Mei is not a good person, and for power, she can climb up by hook or by crook. She would not do unnecessary things. Since the residents of Prince Rue had accepted her kindness, it would definitely become a knife in her hands. You have to be wary of her. Xie Jingxing picked up the wine bowl again and drank all the wine in one gulp. Even though he was smiling, there was coldness in his eyes. Yi Mei? Fu Xiuyi's gaze towards females is as vulgar as always. I am different from him. No matter if your dream is real or not. Xie Jingxing said, the hatred in the dream is also considered as hatred. Just based on the fact that he betrayed your intentions, it is unforgivable. Leave your hatred to me. I will help you take revenge. He interrupted the words that Shen Miao was about to say. Do not say that you want to kill the enemy with your own hands. You are my woman and your hatred is my hatred. In this world, the number of enemies that you and I have is uncountable, and there is no distinction between you and me. If one day you were to meet my enemy and you want to help me take revenge, then consider it as even. Shen Miao frowned. Do you have enemies? Who is it? Xie Jingxing looked at her for a while and suddenly reached out to rub her head. Why do you believe everything that is said? So cute. Presumptuous. Shen Miao said. When she was drunk, she habitually brought out the majesty of an empress. Xie Jingxing's actions paused and Shen Miao was also surprised for a moment. He stared at Shen Miao. Do you still want to be an empress? I do not want to have that kind of dream a second time. Shen Miao said, I also do not want to be that kind of empress a second time. She said. Chapter 10-11. More than half of that jar of 10 prefectures spring ended up in Shen Miao's stomach. Xie Jingxing tried to stop it, but every time Shen Miao was stubborn, even Shen Exen was helpless, not to mention Xie Jingxing. But this time she did not throw a drunken tantrum like before. After she finished the wine, her expression was very calm, and after saying a lot of words, she carried an empty wine jar and staggered out. Xie Jingxing sent her back to the room and instructed Jing Zhiguyu to take good care of her. Jing Zhiguyu jumped in shock and said softly, the body had just recovered, and why did one drink so much wine? One fear that it is not good for the injury. Xie Jingxing glanced at her before turning to leave the room. As he walked in the courtyard, the summer breeze blew on his face and sobered up a little. But he originally drank very little, and at this moment his mind was as clear as a mirror. In fact, it was not as calm as it looked on the surface. Shen Miao's words were like a thunderbolt striking his heart, and in that instant, some things that were puzzling in the past became clear. But Shen Miao's words were too shocking and almost had the title of supernatural powers. He had never believed in ghosts and deities. He did not believe in ghosts and deities but believed in Shen Miao. Xie Jingxing was very clear about Shen Miao as a person. If one really wanted to deceive a person, naturally one would be full of lies with a calm expression. Ever since Xie Jingxing got to know Shen Miao and Ming Qi, he saw how she dealt with the second and third household of the Shen family. Towards Song Zaiqing and towards Jing Chu, she would always smile and give people a stab. She would scheme in her heart, but her face would always be warm and amiable. However, when she was hesitant, it was instead true. The words that she said today had been suppressed in her heart for a long time, else she would not reveal such a relieved expression after saying it. But Xie Jingxing could roughly feel the apprehension in her heart, so he maintained a calm appearance even though his heart was already in a stormy sea. If the things in Shen Miao's dream really happened, then it would really not be a happy dream. Once he thought that Shen Miao ended up following Fu Xiuyi and even ended up in such a miserable state because of Fu Xiuyi, Xie Jingxing could not restrain his anger. It had rained the day before yesterday, and when the green boots stepped on the puddles on the ground, there was a rustling sound. Xie Jingxing stood still and said, "Tai Yi." Tai Yi appeared in response. "Check if Yi Mei's siblings have any connection with Ming Qi," he said. If everything in Shen Miao's dream was true, then this Yi Mei was Shen Miao's enemy, but from Ming Qi to the great Liang, this point did not match up. It was just that now thinking about it, why did Shen Miao show such hostility towards Yi Mei and her brother the first time they met? Now one could understand. Tai Yi was a little surprised, but he still lowered his head and agreed. His thoughts were a mess. He frowned and looked at the crescent moon in the sky. He couldn't tell what he was feeling, so he went back to the courtyard to play with the tiger cub. Jiao Jiao had not seen her master for a long time, and when she saw him coming, she was overjoyed and jumped up to play with him. Xie Jingxing absent-mindedly played with the tiger cub for a while, and when he saw that it was getting late and the tiger cub started to doze off, he then returned to the house. But he was still not sleepy. He walked to the middle of the room, took off his robe, and was about to sit for a while when he suddenly felt something strange. Raising his eyes to look at the bed, he saw that there was a big bump on the bed and there seemed to be shallow breathing sounds. He frowned and walked over to lift the quilt. Suddenly he was startled and then said in amusement, "What are you doing?" On the bed, Shen Miao was wrapped in his quilt and hugging a pillow in her arms as she stared at him. Previously, she had been calm, as if she had not been drunk at all. Now that she had finally regained her senses, the alcohol had gotten to her head. Her fair face had turned bright red, and her pair of clear eyes were finally covered with a layer of water. She said, "I am offering myself as a pillow." Chapter 10-12. Xie Jingxing almost thought that he had heard wrongly and said, "What did you say?" Consort Li once told me that if one wants to obtain a person's heart or admire a person, one must recommend oneself to sleep on the bed. Between males and females, the pleasure of fish and water is a matter of course. I have never enjoyed before, and I think that you also have not, so I came to recommend myself to sleep on the bed. When Xie Jingxing heard her shocking words, his face flushed red and he stared at Shen Miao, as if he did not know how to react. Finally he said, "What nonsense are you saying?" He did not know who the consort Li that she was talking about was, but thinking about the dream that Shen Miao had, Xie Jingxing thought incredulously that it could not be one of her sisters in the inner palace. Shen Miao sat on the couch and was drunk, but she still had to put on a dignified air and said, "I want to discuss with you." Xie Jingxing quickly walked to the table and poured a cup of herbal tea for himself. After drinking a mouthful of the herbal tea, the depression in his heart was slightly appeased. Shen Miao's completely different temperament when she was drunk was really unbearable. But to be able to say the words pleasure of fish and water, what was she thinking? He said, "I am not a person who takes advantage of others." After a long time, he did not hear any movements. Xie Jingxing felt that it was somewhat strange and could not help but turn back to take a look, but he spat out a mouthful of tea. Shen Miao was rather clever and one did not know why her outer robe was gone and she was wearing a doo-doo. She said aggrievedly, "Do you think that I am ugly? So you are not willing to touch me?" That large piece of skin was like the white snow in winter but was more moist than the white snow. It was like milk but was more sparkling than milk. In addition to her disheveled hair, it made her cute little face and hazy eyes. It was really a feast for the eyes. Xie Jingxing quickly went over and covered her with a blanket in a flurry. "You are really very sick." Shen Miao said plausibly, "You and I are husband and wife. What is wrong with the consummation?" Xie Jingxing took a deep breath and avoided the other's misty eyes. "Your injuries are not completely healed. Let's talk about it another day." Shen Miao was puzzled. "Did you not say 2 months later? I saw that the date has long arrived." Xie Jingxing almost collapsed. He emphasized, "I'm not someone who takes advantage of others. What kind of person do you think I am?" "I know." Shen Miao nodded her head. "I am here to fulfill your wish." Xie Jingxing, "Be good. It's too late now. Let's talk about it another day." Xie Jingxing tucked her in and turned to leave. He was afraid that if he stayed any longer, he would not be able to hold it in. At the end of the day, he was a hot-blooded young man who was in the prime of his life. With a beauty in his arms, and a beloved woman at that, it would be strange if he did not have any reaction. But he did not want to take advantage of Shen Miao when she was drunk. He respected Shen Miao, so he was not willing to use such a method. But just as he stood up, his sleeve was pulled by Shen Miao and the blanket that he had just tucked in slid down. Shen Miao simply half knelt on the couch but was a head shorter than Xie Jingxing. She was a little anxious and hugged Xie Jingxing's neck. "No." Xie Jingxing, with a soft and fragrant jade in his arms, he could almost feel the other party's exquisite and delicate body. There was a faint female fragrance coming from Shen Miao's body. He obviously did not drink a lot of wine, but at this moment he felt that his entire body was hot, as if the strong alcohol had gone to his head and his rationality was gradually fading. "It is today. After today, I will regret it," she said in all seriousness, but one did not know if she was really drunk or pretending to be drunk. Chapter 10:13. When Xie Jingxing heard it, he paused his action of pushing her down and glanced at her. "Renege." Shen Miao seemed to feel a little dizzy. This kind of kneeling posture made her somewhat uncomfortable, so she shook her head and looked at Xie Jingxing carefully before her lips hooked up into a smile. She said, "Ben Gong feel that you are very beautiful and it is your fortune to fancy you. Is it not good to follow Ben Gong?" Xie Jingxing, "Here it comes again. Here it comes again." Xie Jingxing vaguely remembered a few years ago in the manner when Shen Miao was drunk and treated him as Xiaoyu and forcefully kissed him. Now that time had passed, this scene in front of him was unusually familiar. His voice suddenly carried a tinge of danger. "Follow you?" Shen Miao nodded her head and moved closer to his ear to speak mysteriously, "Ensure that you will be rich and glorious for a lifetime." Xie Jingxing laughed. In fact, in Shen Miao's drunken state, there was a bit of naivety that only a young female would have, like an unripened fruit. It could not be said to be amorous, and the words she spoke simply made one speechless. But her every move was a fatal seduction to him. The seductive eyes of those peerless beauties could not compare to her naive hug. "If you are not willing, Ben Gong will go and find other people. If you miss Ben Gong, you will regret it for the rest of your life." Shen Miao threatened him. Xie Jingxing said, "Still want to find other people?" He suddenly fell forward. Shen Miao was originally holding onto his neck, but now she was pressed down by his body. Xie Jingxing smiled gently and leaned over to her ear to whisper, "You, this Empress, are really arrogant. Want me to serve you and still think of other men? I'm not very happy. Do you want to be punished?" Shen Miao struggled to free a hand and took out a booklet-like thing from under the bed and looked at him with bright eyes. "Look at this." Xie Jingxing was surprised for a moment and took a look. His expression instantly became very interesting and his tone was restrained as he said, "Where did you get this from?" Shen Miao's neck shrank. "Mother gave it to me. I have said before that I want to discuss with you." Xie Jingxing was startled for a moment before gently smiling. "Discuss?" Shen Miao's head nodded like a chicken pecking rice. This subject will naturally serve your highness until your body and mind are comfortable. He spoke meaningfully, but his eyes suddenly became as dangerous as a wolf's. He asked, Empress, will you really not regret it? You'll regret it for the rest of your life if you miss this consort, she muttered. Xie Jingxing did not speak anymore, and with a wave of his sleeves, the candle in the room was extinguished. His deep voice came from the darkness. You're right. If I missed you, I would regret it for the rest of my life. The sun was high up in the sky. Even with the shade of the trees, the summer sun still managed to shine through the gaps between the branches and leaves and onto the ground, reflecting a small patch of golden mottled light. Birds were chirping on the branches. Their cool chirps were filled with joy. Shen Miao felt a splitting headache and subconsciously turned over, but felt that there seemed to be something blocking in front of her. He opened his eyes in a daze and was immediately stunned. She lay in the man's arms, her hands still tightly wrapped around his waist. As he looked up, he saw a handsome face with a pair of peach blossom eyes that seemed to be smiling yet not smiling. It was a smile that contained the smile of a sales promotion. Shen Miao's heart exploded. What happened last night? How come she did not remember anything? She subconsciously wanted to sit up but felt that her entire body was sore. It was so painful that she sucked in a breath of cold air. The quilt that was tucked around her naturally slid down, revealing some obvious traces. Chapter 10:14. Shen Miao, ? The clothes were scattered on the floor and the wine bowls were piled up on the table, filling the room with a gentle atmosphere. No matter how slow she was, she would be able to guess what had happened. Awake! Xie Jingxing raised his brows. Shen Miao tried her best to restore her calm expression, but no matter how she pretended, there was a hint of panic. When this panic fell into Xie Jingxing's eyes, it made him not know whether to laugh or cry. He said, You were very brave last night. Why are you afraid now? Shen Miao's heart quivered. Once she was drunk, she would not remember anything and her memory was clearer than a piece of white paper. The memories before she was drunk were still at the time when she was talking about the past with Xie Jingxing. Because she thought about it, she felt that it was the easiest to believe it when she explained it with a dream. Otherwise, for no reason, no matter how real it was, to say that one was resurrected from the dead, it would be ridiculous. She drank some wine to boost her courage and remembered that Xie Jingxing seemed to believe her words and did not have any other feelings towards her. Why did they sleep on the same bed? Xie Jingxing swept a glance at her confused look and said leisurely, Do you know what you did last night? Shen Miao did not dare to look at him and looked at the bedding calmly. What else can I do? Sleep. You slept with me. Xie Jingxing said, Want me to serve you well? Shen Miao almost choked on her own saliva. That was her? The elegant and virtuous Empress Xin who sat in the 6 palaces? Xie Jingxing must be lying to her. How could there be such a shameless and promiscuous matter? Xie Jingxing said, You said that if I follow you, you will carry me for a lifetime of glory and riches and have a limitless future. Shen Miao said, There is no need to take drunk words seriously. Moreover, she changed the topic, How do I know if you are lying to me? It is impossible for me to say such words. She might as well turn hostile. Xie Jingxing was not in a hurry and calmly took out a booklet-like thing from under the pillow and flipped through it before saying, Yes, you also took the thing that your mother gave you and wanted to discuss it with me so that I can dispel your doubts. Do you still remember? He swept the booklet in front of Shen Miao. Shen Miao only took a glance, but when she saw it clearly, she wanted to vomit blood in her heart. Could it be? All of these were available. This was given to her by Luo Shui Yen before she got married. It taught her, the secrets of the boudoir. This thing was kept by her, so it was impossible for Xie Jingxing to find it. In other words, she must have taken the initiative to dig it out and give it to Xie Jingxing? Then what else did she do to Xie Jingxing before? Did she really want Xie Jingxing to serve her well? Shen Miao felt that it was nothing more than being struck by lightning. Xie Jingxing seemed to think that she was not embarrassed enough and lightly said, Last night, you dragged me to discuss it and I only managed to discuss the first few pages. I thought that there is no need to be impatient for a long time, but you are so thirsty for talents. I must try this extremely difficult position. Stop. Shen Miao quickly interrupted his words, but her face was already red from embarrassment as she said, "Drinking is a hindrance, you don't know how to stop me." "How would I dare?" Xie Jingxing made an expression of being wronged. "If I do not agree, you will chop off my head." Shen Miao, she felt that it was really too embarrassing. Thinking of her coyly seducing Xie Jingxing, perhaps all the face that she had accumulated in both her previous lifetimes would be thrown away cleanly. Xie Jingxing, however, seemed to be in a very good mood as he looked at her with a smile. "You still told me that you still want to discuss it tonight." "It is not necessary for tonight." Shen Miao quickly interrupted his words and wanted to jump out of the bed to run out. But she was pulled back by Xie Jingxing and was pulled into his embrace. He looked down at Shen Miao and the lazy smile on his face disappeared and was replaced with a serious expression. Chapter 10:15. He frowned and asked, "You regret it?" Shen Miao was startled. Xie Jingxing's eyes were extremely good-looking and sometimes Shen Miao would find it strange. For a grown man, why did his eyes look so good? It was as if there was infinite affection. So when they were in Ming Qi's Ding capital, there was always a lingering affection. However, he himself was indifferent. This kind of man was too dangerous, so one must not provoke him. Falling in love with this kind of man was definitely a calamity for a female, but to be loved by this kind of man, it was probably the fortune of a lifetime. He understood respect and had selfish motives, but was also overbearing and adorable. At this moment he was staring at Shen Miao seriously. In that naturally arrogant and haughty gaze, there was some cautiousness, and that cautiousness would make one feel that one was placed on the letter by him, was protected by him from harm, and was the most important person to him. Shen Miao's gaze landed on the red line on Xie Jingxing's hand. He said that he disliked it, but at the end he did not take it off. Shen Miao raised her head and said honestly, "No regrets." She only felt a little shy. Xie Jingxing's eyes brightened up. She said, "Since it is done, what is there to regret? It is not like it was done by others." At the end she was still avoiding Xie Jingxing's gaze. Xie Jingxing pulled her head over and forced her to look at him. "Really?" Shen Miao said, "Really?" Xie Jingxing stared at her for a long time and Shen Miao felt more embarrassed. She wanted to run but was pulled over by Xie Jingxing. "Let me see." "See what?" "Last night you refused to stop no matter what, and I did not have time to look at your wound. Even though it is a superficial wound, one must look carefully." He pulled Shen Miao into his embrace. Shen Miao saw that he was only wearing his inner clothes and revealed a large part of his chest, and felt her face burning as she rejected, "No. No need. I will do it myself." "That cannot be done." As Xie Jingxing spoke, he pulled her onto his body again. Shen Miao was unable to escape anymore. Outside, Jing Zhengguyu were sweeping the floor while pricking up their ears to listen to the movements inside. However, both of them did not have any martial arts skills, and with a door separating them, they were unable to hear anything. Song Yang squatted in front of the door, playing with the birds in the birdcage as he said, "You two have been sweeping here for 2 hours. If you keep sweeping, the stone slabs at the door will be swept through." Jing Zhengguyu were surprised for a moment and stopped what they were doing. Jingzhe looked at Song Yang and wanted to ask but felt that this question was too difficult to ask, so her face turned red and refused to speak. Song Yang, on the other hand, was much more thick-skinned than her. With one look, he knew what she wanted to ask. He waved his hand and said, "Don't worry, everything went smoothly." Even though Jingzhe and Guyu were shy, they still gave a sigh of relief at the same time. Jingzhe threw a proud look at Guyu, but Guyu only gave her a rebuking look. Shen Miao was drunk last night, and when Jingzhe and Guyu were tidying up the room, they coincidentally took away the booklet that Luo Shui-yen gave Shen Miao. Shen Miao asked what was that booklet, and Jingzhe suddenly had an idea. She thought that every time Shen Miao was drunk, she did not know what she had done and had the intention to matchmake her own mistress and Xie Jingxing. At the beginning, when Shen Miao was married, Luo Shui-yen had repeatedly exhorted that these two maids must always admonish Shen Miao. In the end, after being married for so long, they did not even consummate the marriage. Seeing that both of them had a good relationship, Jingzhe thought that it was not that her own young lady did not understand, but this Prince Ray was also ignorant. She had the intention to add fuel to the fire. Chapter 1016. Thus, she simply took advantage of Shen Miao being drunk to guide her. Only His Highness the Prince of First Rank can help foreign with the things on this booklet. Now thinking about it, Jingzhe felt that her expression at that time was no different from that brothel's procuress. Shen Miao was drunk and did not understand at all, so she took the booklet and left. Even if Gu Yu wanted to stop them, it was too late and could only follow behind. The two maids were nervous and uneasy, and after guarding outside for the whole night, their eyes had turned black, but Shen Miao did not come out from Xie Jingxing's room. Now hearing Song Yang's words, both of them gave a sigh of relief in their hearts. They felt that they had done a good deed. No matter how ignorant their young lady and son-in-law were, after hearing such matters, they would have tasted it, and after 2 or 3 times, practice makes perfect. Just as they were thinking about it, Uncle Tang walked out from the back, and when he saw the 3 of them, he first roared at Song Yang, "What are you doing guarding here so early in the morning? Still not leaving?" He then smiled at Jingzhe and Gu Yu. "Why do you look like you are not in a good mood?" Jingzhe and Gu Yu were brought over by Shen Miao, thus Uncle Tang could not be as impolite as when he taught Song Yang a lesson. When Song Yang saw such differential treatment, he snorted and left. Jingzhe and Gu Yu could not stay for long and quickly slipped away after saying a few words to Uncle Tang. Uncle Tang stood alone in front of Xie Jingxing's door, and after everyone had left, he suddenly laughed to himself. After laughing foolishly for a while, he seemed to have thought of something and said to himself, "Need to boil some tonic." He then left in a hurry. Most likely the Mou army was well aware of the happy events that happened in the residence of Prince Ray, that everyone had a tacit understanding. But Star Anise and Fennel did not know about it. They were temporarily taking care of Pei Lang. Pei Lang's injuries were much more serious than Shen Miao's. Even though he managed to keep his life, but that knife wound was deep into the bones, so Gao Yang did not dare to take it lightly. Star Anise and Fennel looked at Pei Lang so that if there was anything wrong, they could look for Gao Yang to take a look. Pei Lang always woke up a few times in the night, but the time was very short and he would fall asleep again after a while. Star Anise and Fennel were so busy that they had no way of knowing what was going on with Shen Miao and Xie Jingxing. It was almost noon when Fennel came in with a bowl of gruel. Pei Lang couldn't eat anything else due to his injuries. As soon as he entered the room, he saw Pei Lang sitting in front of the window, staring at the branches in a daze. "Young Master Pei?" Fennel was taken aback. She walked over happily and placed the bowl of porridge aside. "You're finally awake." Pei Lang slowly turned his head and looked at her. He seemed to have just recognized that she was a servant of Ray Wang Fu and said, "Wang Fei should also wake up." Fennel was a little curious as to why Pei Lang would use such a firm tone, but she still said, "I woke up yesterday. Madam is not seriously injured, but you are seriously injured. It's all thanks to you that you blocked the knife for Madam and saved her life." Pei Lang lowered his head and seemed to laugh. He said in a low voice, "Help? It's clear that I owe her." Fennel did not hear Pei Lang's words clearly and asked, "What did you say?" Pei Lang, on the other hand, looked a little absent-minded. He finally remembered. After blocking the knife for Shen Miao, at the edge of life and death, he had a dream. That dream was very long and very real. But it made him suddenly see the light. Why did Shen Miao always show hostility towards him? Why did he always feel an inexplicable guilt towards Shen Miao? So it was like this. The abbot in the dream said, sacrificing one's life, that chance to do it again was only a possibility, and perhaps it would be in vain. That abbot also said, if he could do it again, some opportunities would be disrupted and perhaps he would be in pain because of it. Pei Lang also agreed. He once loved a female, but his love was no different from Fu Xiuyi's coldness. They were both pushing Shen Miao to a dead end step by step. He sympathized with Shen Miao, but at the same time rationally weighed the pros and cons and abandoned Shen Miao. In one's life, it was actually living by constantly abandoning things. He and Fu Xiaoyi had abandoned Shen Miao, so in this lifetime, Shen Miao also abandoned them without any hesitation. Unfortunately, it was Xie Jingxing who was lucky. But after thinking about it, it was also expected. But after knowing so much of the cause and effect, he no longer had the face to face Shen Miao. He said that he would accompany and help her, but now thinking about it, it was only because of the guilt from the previous lifetime and he was repaying it. But he was unable to face his own heart. The complicated entanglement of this marriage caused his heart to be in a mess. It was time to end this mistake. Some thoughts should not have been born from the beginning. Once they were born, it was a mistake. Now it was time for him to cut them off. Fenxiang said, "Young Master Pei, drink some porridge first. Your body still needs to recuperate. Later young Master Gao will come and perform acupuncture on you. As long as you wake up and recuperate for a few days, with young Master Gao's medical skills, you will be safe and sound." Pei Lang paused for a moment before saying, "Many thanks. Young Master Pei is too polite." Fenxiang said, "You saved Foreign's life and are the benefactor of the residence of the Prince of First Rank. Trouble you to bring me a pen and paper." Pei Lang said. His lips were pale and his eyes were dim, but his tone was very firm. Chapter 10:17. Shen Miao and Xie Jingxing were reconciled and the entire Prince Rui residence seemed to heave a sigh of relief. What was a blessing in disguise was that not only did both of them reconcile, they also started to sleep in the same room. This was simply out of everyone's expectations, especially Uncle Tang, who was the happiest. Every day Xie Jingxing would boil tiger, deer and bull's penis soup, making Shen Miao speechless every time she saw it. Xie Jingxing began to investigate the Yi family's matters, but what was strange was that Yi Mei siblings were indeed born and raised in the Great Liang and previously lived in Qin province, so there was no mistake about it. Shen Miao also did not know why it was so, but at the end she could only think that it was her rebirth that inadvertently changed a lot of things. For example, Fu Xiaoyi's luck, or the identity of Mei Foreign siblings. But no matter how much it changed, there was one thing that would not change. Yi Mei was her enemy in the past life, and in this life she entered the Yi family, so the position of their sworn enemy did not change at all. Pei Lang's injuries also gradually got better. Shen Miao went to take a look once but did not enter the room. She only looked from afar, and when she saw that he was able to get down and drink his medicine, she then left. Towards Pei Lang, Shen Miao's feelings were very complicated, but most likely Pei Lang did not know about the matters of the past life. Even though she knew about the matters of the past life, she was unable to face the other party with a peaceful mind. Thus she could only maintain this kind of distance. Xie Jingxing, however, was very satisfied with this and said that she was more sensible than in the past and used this opportunity to reward her. It was as if he wanted to make up for all the rooms that he did not consummate, making Shen Miao unable to lift her spirits these few days, as if a male ghost was plucking her yin to nourish her young. The situation in Long Yi looked stable, but the whirlpool of disputes was not what others could imagine. After the imperial hunt that Emperor Yonglu had set up, he started to close the net that was previously set up to deal with the Lu family. The Lu family was busy dealing with the imperial family, and Xie Jingxing was also busier. Naturally, Shen Miao would not be relaxed because there was a letter from Ming Qi's side. Luo Shuiyan's letter to Shen Miao had arrived. There were two letters to home. One was from Luo Shuiyan, saying that everything was fine with them and also exhorted Shen Miao to not swallow any grievances in Long Yi and to write back to tell them. Then he carefully exhorted to treat Xie Jingxing with respect, to support and understand each other. Forget it, he just wanted to ask about the situation at Shen Miao's end. The other letter was written by Shen Qiu. Shen Qiu's letter was different from Luo Shuiyan's. At the beginning, when Shen Miao was married, she had talked to Shen Qiu about some things. Even though it was not clear, it hinted to Shen Qiu to be wary of the imperial family of Ming Qi. The imperial family of Ming Qi was a pot of mud, and what the Shen family had to do was to be wise and protect themselves. No matter what method they used, they had to draw a clear relationship with the imperial family, otherwise they could only be dragged into the mud. If it was necessary, even if they had to abandon the Shen family's integrity, they must first preserve their lives. This time in Shen Qiu's letter, he talked about the situation in Mingqi. Counting it, Shen Miao had left the Ding capital for more than half a year. The situation in the Ding capital was already on the verge of breaking out, and there would be changes every day, not to mention in half a year. However, the sudden change caught everyone off guard. Emperor Wenhui was seriously ill. First was his cough, and then his condition worsened, and now it was to the point where he could not attend court. Occasionally when he attended court, he was listless and would disperse after listening to a few sentences. One did not know why there were rumors in the palace that Emperor Wenhui was like a dried-up oil lamp and would not be able to last more than a year before he would not be able to live. When Shen Miao saw this line of words, she only laughed. How long could Emperor Wenhui live for? Was it really just 1 year? Shen Miao did not believe it, as in the previous lifetime Emperor Wenhui did not die so early. Of course it was hard to say if there was anything fishy about Emperor Wenhui's death. The imperial family of Mingqi was intricate and complicated, and the princes were not as simple as Long Ye's side. If one person ascended the throne, there would be a lot of sacrifices, so what was one imperial father? Chapter 10:18. Shen Qiu mentioned in the letter that Emperor Wenhui was seriously ill, but one did not know why he made things difficult for his most favored consort Su Xian. Consort Su Xian was demoted to a talented person, and not only that, the entire Su family was also implicated by Emperor Wenhui, implicating the two brothers, Prince Zhou and Prince Jing. These two brothers could no longer manage the matters in court, and Shen Qiu did not understand the specific situation. In short, Consort Su Xian, Prince Zhou and Prince Jing had all fallen out of favor. Prince Zhou and Prince Jing seemed to have fallen into a disadvantageous position in the fight for the throne, whereas Prince Li's faction was unprecedentedly on good terms with Prince Ding. Prince Li's faction was also a powerful faction in the fight for the throne, and Prince Ding, Fu Xiuyi, had no relationship with them at all, but now they were on good terms. Thinking about it, it was not right. What made one even more suspicious was that in this faction, the original Prince Li actually had the intention to follow Prince Ding's lead. When writing till here, Shen Qiu's handwriting was somewhat sloppy, and it was obvious that his mood was not calm. Forget it, he then summed it up. Most probably in the current Ding capital, among the original princes, the hottest one was the 9th prince, Fu Xiuyi, who had no desires. And Fu Xiuyi's consort mother, Consort Dong Shu, had become Emperor Wenhui's support. When Emperor Wenhui was seriously ill, the person he doted on was the person closest to him. Some people guessed that looking at this trend, the crown prince would eventually be gone and Emperor Wenhui would most likely pass the throne to Prince Ding, Fu Xiuyi. Thus, a large wave of officials switched sides to Fu Xiuyi's side. No matter if it was because of his own reasons or external factors, no matter how one looked at it, Fu Xiuyi would become the future crown prince of Mingqi. And Fu Xiuyi gradually started to deal with the Shen family. The Shen family's military power had previously been taken back by Emperor Wenhui, but Fu Xiuyi wanted to give Shen Xian new power, to let both father and son lead a brand new army. No matter how one looked at it, it was a pit. Fu Xiuyi had obviously dug a pit for the Shen family to jump into, and if one did not do well, they would fall into Fu Xiuyi's trap. Shen Qiu wrote in the letter that the Shen family was using Shen Xian's illness as an excuse to temporarily not take over the military power, but one did not know how long this excuse could be used because Fu Xiuyi would definitely not only use this one method to deal with the Shen family. But it was fortunate that the Shen family was not without help. Fu Xiuyi's target was the Feng family, which was Feng and Ning's residence. The Feng family and the Shen family had plans to join hands, and with some of the other officials of Mingqi, it should be enough to protect themselves. But in the end there was still some bewilderment in her words, as if she felt that the Shen family that had been loyal for a few generations would now end up in a situation where the imperial family was in a confrontation and mutual suspicion. This inevitably made one sigh. After Shen Miao finished reading the letter, she folded it and kept it, feeling somewhat worried. Xie Jingxing took a look with her, and seeing her worried look, he asked, "You are very worried?" Fu Xiuyi is starting to deal with the Shen family. Shen Miao said in a deep voice, "The speed of his rise is too fast. In less than a year, there is actually no one in the Ding capital who can contend with him. Prince Zhou and Prince Jing were so arrogant in the beginning, but now even consort Su Xian has declined and Prince Li was also subdued by him. Shen Miao said, "His means are not simple." Even though she had long known that Fu Xiuyi was the emperor of Mingqi in his past lifetime, but in this lifetime there was no Shen family and he was still able to turn the situation around in a disadvantageous situation. This made Shen Miao feel that the arrangement of the Shen family was somewhat rash. Perhaps she had underestimated the enemy. It is not strange. Xie Jingxing smiled. In order to fight for the throne, he had been preparing for many years. Even though Prince Zhou and Prince Jing had the advantage, they were slower than him. Not to mention Prince Li, without the support of his mother's family, they could not be compared. But why did he still target the Shen family? Shen Miao frowned. It is reasonable to say that since the Shen family's military power is gone, there would not be any threat to him. For example, the residents of the Marquis of Lineage. He would not start to deal with the residents of the Marquis of Lineage, but would not let go of the Shen family. Fu Xiuyi would not waste time on meaningless things. Towards the suppression of the Shen family, it was considered as a superfluous move, so why bother? Chapter 10:19. Xie Jingxing pondered for a moment before saying, "Perhaps it is because of you?" Shen Miao looked at him. "You married to the great Liang and Fu Xiuyi previously suspected my relationship with you, suspecting that the great Liang was the backing of the Shen family. After returning to Longyi, I also ordered people to pay attention to Fu Xiuyi's movements and discovered that he was investigating everything about me in the residence of the Marquis of Lineage. Perhaps he knew my identity. Perhaps they misunderstood the relationship between the Shen family and me, and thought that the Shen family had already defected to the great Liang, or had other plans." He paused before continuing, "Fu Xiuyi's methods are ruthless and he has a suspicious nature. Once he senses that something is not right, he will definitely cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. As long as the Shen family makes him feel uneasy, he will spare no effort to eradicate them." "I understand that." Shen Miao's eyes were slightly cold. Even at the end of the previous lifetime, did Fu Xiuyi not clean up the first household neatly because of the Shen family's military power? "But you don't have to worry." Xie Jingxing pinched her face. "I have arranged people in the Ding capital. No matter what, they have the ability to protect your family's safety." "You have long arranged people?" Shen Miao asked. "Why not tell me earlier?" Xie Jingxing said, "Is there a need to claim credit for this kind of matter? That is also my family. Without proper arrangements, how can I let them stay in the Ding capital?" When Shen Miao heard Xie Jingxing say, "That is also my family," her heart was as sweet as eating honey and there was a smile in her eyes as she said, "Speaking of which, I did not think that the Feng family would actually join hands with eldest brother." In the beginning, in order to prevent Feng and Ning from repeating the mistakes of the past lifetime, she also specially took care of Shun Qiu to help look after the Feng family, but one did not know when they had such a friendship. But from this, it seemed that Feng and Ning would not be like the previous lifetime, marrying that Biao older brother who was golden on the outside but rotten on the inside. "But there is one thing that I wanted to tell you." Xie Jingxing's face suddenly became serious. "Fu Xiuyi and the Emperor of Qin State have a secret relationship." Shen Miao was startled for a moment before asking, "Do you need to borrow troops?" Speaking of this matter, Shen Miao recalled the time when she was a hostage in the Qin country for 5 years. Now that Fu Xiuyi did not have a wife, could it be that he was looking for other hostages? It could be possible that they had reached some private agreements, most likely to be ceding land. Xie Jingxing said. Shen Miao frowned. Is it to help him fight for the throne? But borrowing the power of a foreign country to fight for the throne, there will be many implications in the future. Fu Xiuyi will not do this. Xie Jingxing's eyes sank and said, to deal with the great Liang. Shen Miao looked at him. They want to deal with the great Liang? That's crazy. Even though Mingqi and the Qin country's combined strength was much higher than before, but the great Liang's strength was placed in front of everyone. At least it would be a situation where both sides would suffer. They had lived in harmony for so many years, so why would they take the initiative to start a fight? This is not something that can be tolerated. Xie Jingxing laughed. Moreover, Long Yi is currently in chaos because of the Lu and Yi families. They will not let go of this opportunity. Shen Miao carefully thought about Xie Jingxing's words for a while and said, "What you said is right, sooner or later there will be such a day. It was just that to start a war now, it might not be a good opportunity for the great Liang. You don't have to worry." Xie Jingxing rubbed her head. "Leave these to me. I am also the Wangfei of the residence of Prince Rui." Shen Miao glared at him and was very dissatisfied with his words. Xie Jingxing looked at her unruffled. "Oh, from an empress to a Wangfei, don't you find yourself at a disadvantage? The meal has already been eaten, so what is the point of saying these now?" Shen Miao snorted. Xie Jingxing still wanted to speak, but Fennel Xiang knocked on the door and motioned her to come in. Fennel Xiang looked at Shen Miao and then looked at Xie Jingxing with a tangled expression. Chapter 10:20. Do you have anything to say to me? Shen Miao looked at her inexplicably. If there is something, just say it directly. She did not care about Xie Jingxing's presence. Fen Xiang said, "This afternoon young Master Pei said that he wanted to go out for a walk. Your servants remembered that young Master Gao also said that young Master Pei should go out for a walk. As long as he doesn't go too far, it will be fine." Gentleman Pei wanted to be alone, so this servant did not think much. Normally he would only walk for a while at the door, but today he did not return even when it was dark. Shen Miao frowned. Something happened? Pei Lang did not have any martial arts, and if he met with any danger, he would not have any ability to protect himself. This servant also thought so. Fennel said, "But Ba Jiao found this on the table in Gentleman Pei's room." She took out a letter from her sleeves and handed it to Shen Miao before saying, "The room is missing some of Gentleman Pei's clothes and valuables." If this servant did not guess wrongly, Gentleman Pei should have left. Just as Shen Miao was about to open the letter, she paused. Xie Jingxing's expression also changed slightly. Did he say anything before he left? Shen Miao asked Fennel. He did not say anything. As usual, he even said that today's weather was good. Fennel said. Shen Miao was somewhat dazed. Xie Jingxing said, "Look at what is written in the letter." He was about to get up and leave when Shen Miao grabbed his sleeve. Xie Jingxing turned back and Shen Miao said, "Read it together." His footsteps paused, and after thinking about it, he sat down again, but there was a trace of smile on his lips. Opening the letter, what entered one's eyes was Pei Lang's words. Pei Lang's words were as clear as he was and had the elegance of those famous scholars. He looked like that himself, but it was hard to imagine that such a romantic and refined person would be involved in the struggle for power in his previous life. The beginning of the letter said that after staying in the residence of Prince Rui for such a long time, he had given the residence a lot of trouble, and many thanks to both husband and wife for taking him in. He also hoped that Shen Miao would keep her promise and settle Luing for the rest of her life. Pei Lang wrote that even though he followed Shen Miao to Long Yi previously, it was only an expedient measure. It was because of Fu Xiu that he had no choice but to hide in Long Yi. But there were still many inconveniences in staying in Prince Rui's residence. He had his own plans and was prepared to travel around in his lifetime to increase his knowledge, so he left without saying goodbye. Due to the fact that Shen Miao and Shen Miao previously had the friendship of teacher and student, later on they had some friendship. During the time in the residence of Prince Ding, he understood some matters of Prince Ding and knew that Shen Miao seemed to be wary of Prince Ding, so he arranged some things for Shen Miao, hoping that it would be useful in the future. After handing over the things in this letter to Shen Miao, their relationship was considered to be cleared. "No one owes anyone anything," Pei Lang wrote. He did not know if he would have the chance to meet her again in this life, so he could only say goodbye. Pei Lang's letter was very simple and there was almost nothing special about it. One did not know if it was to draw a line between him and Shen Miao, but the words were filled with alienation and politeness. The refined and courteous look was like he had returned to the time when he was a teacher and student in Guangwentang. The other piece of paper in the letter was densely packed with records of some of Fu Xiuyi's matters. It was about his confidants, some of his plans, some of his future steps, the people that he wanted to rope in and the people that he wanted to bring down. Xie Jingxing originally followed Shen Miao and casually swept a glance over that piece of paper, but when he saw the back, his expression could not help but become serious. This letter recorded everything about Fu Xiuyi in great detail. In this way, Fu Xiuyi seemed to have no secrets in front of them and everything was exposed. With this, to deal with Fu Xiuyi, it was like grabbing the snake's weak point, and every step was like a drill to the heart. Chapter 1021. Xie Jingxing said, "How could he know so much?" Even if Pei Lang was a spy by Fu Xiuyi's side and Fu Xiuyi trusted him previously, it was not possible for him to trust to this extent. And these chess pieces that Fu Xiuyi had hidden in various places were all written out by Pei Lang. It was as if he was a trusted general that had followed him for many years and knew his master's matters like the back of his hand. That was why he was so detailed. Shen Miao's fingertips were somewhat trembling. Some of the things in here clearly happened a few years later. Even now, Fu Xiuyi did not know those people, so how would Pei Lang know? Unless Pei Lang also had the memories of the past lifetime, thus he already knew about Fu Xiuyi's future, confidant and chess pieces, and future plans. When did Pei Lang know about it? It was obvious that he did not understand anything previously. Could it be? Shen Miao's heart moved. She was on Xie Jingxing's birthday and dreamt of the past lifetime because of the assassination. Could it be the same for Pei Lang? She looked at the fennel. What is different about Gentleman Pei these days? Different places? The fennel carefully replied, there seems to be no difference, just that he often sat there in a daze, not knowing what he was thinking about. But Gentleman Pei's character was quiet previously, so it should be during the period of recuperation. Shen Miao could not make up her mind and wanted to ask if Pei Lang knew about the matters of the past lifetime. Pei Lang was the person that followed Fu Xiuyi for the longest time, so naturally he understood Fu Xiuyi the deepest. But just as he wanted to speak, he stopped. So what about it? If Pei Lang really recalled the past lifetime, just like how Shen Miao was unable to face Pei Lang would also be unable to face her. The two of them were not considered as fated enemies, nor were they close friends. There was a blood debt that was personally paid off. Deep in the palace, one had no choice but to commit a mistake. One could not act as if nothing had happened, and one could not clearly explain it. Xie Jingxing saw her uncertain expression and asked, "Do you need me to order people to capture him back?" Shen Miao recovered to her senses and said, "No need. Since he wants to live his own life, then let him go." Meeting was better than not meeting, so it was good for Pei Lang to leave like this. She pinched that piece of paper and there was a hint of sternness in her eyes. When Xie Jingxing saw it, he said, "It is written here, it's true." Shen Miao said, "One have to hand this to eldest brother. We are not in the Ding capital and it would not be easy to move around with this. Leave it to big brother and father. Big brother and father will see to it. With this, at least the Shen family has another bargaining chip." After that, he was in a difficult position, but this thing is very valuable and must be sent back to Mingqi. If it is robbed on the way, let the MOU army go. Xie Jingxing said indifferently, the MOU army had been sending letters for so many years and had never been intercepted before. Shen Miao's heart was slightly at ease, but before she could speak, Pei Lang's letter was taken away by Xie Jingxing. Xie Jingxing nonchalantly threw the letter away and said, "It is too late." "How is it late?" Shen Miao said curiously, "The sky just turned dark. Although we don't have to get Mr. Pei back, we have to ensure his safety. He was stabbed for no reason that day. If he gets targeted again." Before the words were finished, Shen Miao was already carried up by Xie Jingxing. He threw Shen Miao on the bed and leaned close to her before saying, "Try to care about Pei Lang again?" Shen Miao, in the palace. In the imperial garden, the lotus flowers were in full bloom in the summer and the dark green lotus leaves almost covered the pond. Empress Xianda was sitting in the pavilion. Even though there was no moon today, there were stars, the cool breeze was blowing and the water was sparkling. It was a good scenery. She ordered people to brew scented tea and to drink a small cup in the summer. It was very comfortable. Chapter 10:22. Tao Gugu stood behind her and smiled, commenting, "The lotus flowers are blooming well this year." Empress Xianda glanced and smiled, replying, "Last year, I had people change the seeds. This year it is much more prosperous." She added, "The summer is also cool." Just as she spoke, she saw someone pass by from afar. She seemed to see Empress Xianda and the others. Her movements paused slightly. She turned and walked towards the pavilion. When she came closer, she saw clearly that this person wasn't anyone else but Jing Fei. Compared to Jing Fei's arrogant and domineering appearance in the past, Jing Fei looked much more disheveled today. Or maybe it shouldn't be said today. Recently, Jing Fei's condition hadn't been good. She didn't seem to be in the mood to take care of her clothing. Her usually beautiful face showed signs of tiredness. But when she saw Empress Xianda, the tiredness instantly turned to hatred. She said, "I saw someone here from afar and was wondering who was in such a good mood. It was the Empress." Empress Xianda smiled noncommittally and said, "Ben Gong is drinking tea here. Does Jing Fei want to drink a cup?" Jing Fei smiled coldly at her and said, "Jejia is in the mood to drink tea, but Mimi is not." Emperor Yonglu started to suppress the Lu family. The people in the Hogong didn't understand the court, but they could see the emperor's attitude. The concubine that had been the most favored now couldn't move the emperor even if she cried and begged. The meaning behind this was very deep. Ben Gong doesn't care if Jing Fei is in the mood or not. Empress Xianda smiled and continued to pour tea. "The tea will always be here." Jing Fei was so angry she was trembling. Lu Foran had come to the palace to find her and said that Emperor Yongle had acted against the Lu family. She also said that she had Emperor Yongle's favor but couldn't even be moved by a pillow breeze. She wanted her to find out what Emperor Yongle was thinking. If necessary, it was possible to ask for mercy. But Jing Fei did it, but it was useless. In reality, after so many years, Emperor Yongle had pampered her. Even in this Hogong, Empress Xianda had to be courteous to her. No matter how arrogant she would always be safe in the end. But she had never changed Emperor Yongle's mind. Sometimes she felt that Emperor Yongle seemed to have seen everything and knew that she was purposely trying to please him. Sometimes, Jing Fei felt slightly ashamed. But other times she felt that Emperor Yongle really did pamper her. Now that the Lu family was in trouble and needed her daughter's help, Jing Fei went to find Emperor Yongle. Emperor Yongle's attitude was cold. Jing Fei's life had been smooth sailing and she had never suffered any hardship. When she entered the palace, with the Lu family's background, she easily rose to the position of a consort. Now that the Lu family was in trouble, she also suffered. She realized that in all these years, other than making a scene in the palace and making enemies, she had done nothing else. In contrast, Empress Xianda, who she had always looked down on, was sitting in the pavilion leisurely drinking tea. Jing Fei's heart was filled with anger. She thought, Emperor Yongle did not love Empress Xianda, but Empress Xianda was respected by everyone because of her title as Empress. This was too unfair. If Empress Xianda was not in the way, she would have become the Empress. Emperor Yongle would not dare to underestimate the Lu family. She would not have such a headache now. Hatred instantly formed in Jing Fei's heart. Coincidentally, she saw Empress Xianda sitting in the pavilion. The side of the pavilion near the lake had a flight of stairs. It was convenient to feed the fish. It was very elegant, but it was slightly dangerous. Jing Fei silently walked a few steps closer to Empress Xianda and said, "Jejia has brewed tea for so many years and naturally knows the principles of brewing tea. But Mimi does not like drinking tea. Tea is bitter and makes people uncomfortable. What is the point of brewing it?" Just as she finished speaking, she gave an ayah and pretended to sprain her ankle as she leaned against Empress Xianda. Empress Xianda was sitting on the side facing the water. When she leaned like that, Empress Xianda would naturally be knocked into the water. Who was Empress Xianda? Jing Fei was dumb, but Empress Xianda wasn't dumb. She didn't care about this little trick and had been on her guard. Seeing Jing Fei lean over, she instantly took a step back and coincidentally avoided Jing Fei. She heard a putong, and the water splashed. The palace maid next to Jing Fei gave an "Aya" in shock. Chapter 1023. In the deep of the night, the residence of Prince Ray had fallen into a deep sleep. When everything was quiet, suddenly a voice was heard. It was Tai Yi, who suddenly had an important matter to report. Normally at this time, Tai Yi would not come and disturb. Shen Miao was in a daze from her sleep when she felt Xie Jingxing get up and leave the door. After a moment, it seemed that he said something to someone outside, and there was the sound of clothes being worn in the room. She opened her eyes and saw Xie Jingxing standing in front of the desk to wear his clothes. Looking outside again, it was the middle of the night and one did not know why he looked like he was going out at this time. "What's the matter?" she asked. Xie Jingxing saw that she was awake and said, "Something happened in the palace. I will enter the palace to take a look. Sleep first and do not need to wait for me." Hearing that, Shen Miao's drowsiness was mostly dispersed. Since Xie Jingxing had to go out in the middle of the night, it could be seen that the matter was very serious and it was a matter in the palace. She said, "What matter is it? Is it very serious?" The Empress pushed Lu Jing into the pond. Xie Jingxing said as he put on his outer robe, "The specific matter cannot be said clearly in a short time." Shen Miao first breathed a sigh of relief. Xie Jingxing ran into the palace in the middle of the night, and she thought that there were assassins in the palace. Hearing this, she was reassured. But when she thought about it, she asked in surprise, "Why would the Empress push Jing Fei into the pond?" Shen Miao had rarely seen Empress Xianda and had seen Consort Jing. Facing a person like Consort Jing, Empress Xianda was disdainful to fight with her, and Empress Xianda was not an impulsive person. If it was said that Consort Jing pushed Empress Xianda into the pond, Shen Miao would believe it, but if it was said that Empress Xianda did it, Shen Miao would not believe it. The Lu family are now in the palace. Xie Jingxing said, "They like to be pestering. I will go and take a look first." Shen Miao quickly got up, "I will also go." "It is too late." Xie Jingxing did not agree, "You sleep first. Nothing will happen." Shen Miao shook her head, "Since I have already instructed you to enter the palace, it would not be a simple matter. Anyway, I cannot sleep, and if you leave me alone in the residence, my imagination would run wild. It would be better to go with you and know what is going on. Perhaps I can be of help." Xie Jingxing thought about it and said, "Never mind, I am not at ease leaving you here alone. Let's go." Shen Miao quickly got up and changed her clothes. Because it was too late at this time, the servants were all resting, so Xie Jingxing and Shen Miao only brought Tai Yi and Song Yang along. Both of them rode the carriage on the streets of Long Yi, and there was not a single person on the streets. Xie Jingxing's expression was somewhat cold, and Shen Miao was also thinking seriously in her mind. Even if Empress Xianda really pushed Consort Jing, it would not be worthwhile to call Xie Jingxing to the palace in the middle of the night. To say something unpleasant, even if Consort Jing died because of this, it would be a fight between the women in the inner palace, and it would be able to send the Lu family away. Moreover, now that Emperor Yonglu and the Lu family had almost reached the point of falling out, why would he make a big fuss just to deal with the Lu family? When Shen Miao was in Mingqi, she had seen such palace concubines who would make things difficult for each other because of jealousy. Consort Jing was pushed into the pond by Empress Xianda, and it was the most shoddy framing, so why would Xie Jingxing also make a trip to the palace? Shen Miao always felt that the matter was not that simple. However, Tai Yi said that the person from the palace who came to deliver the imperial edict was not very clear, so no one knew what the specific situation was. Both of them had their own thoughts, and in the blink of an eye, they arrived at the palace doors. At the palace doors was Emperor Yong Li's Deng Gonggong. When he saw Xie Jingxing, he was happy but was surprised for a moment when he saw Shen Miao jumping down from the carriage. However, he did not worry about it and smiled, "Your Highness, Prince of First Rank has finally arrived. His Majesty is waiting for you in the palace." Chapter 1024. Xie Jingxing let Deng Gonggong walk in front while Shen Miao followed behind. After thinking for a while, she asked Deng Gonggong, "Deng Gonggong, is the Empress well now?" "The Empress is fine. Many thanks to Qin Wang Fei's concern. Deng Gonggong smiled. Shen Miao's eyes moved slightly. The Empress was fine, but there was such a big scene. That meant that something happened to that person? Sure enough, when she thought of this, she heard Deng Gonggong said, "But Consort Jing has not woken up at this moment." Xie Jingxing sneered. "What tricks is Lu Jing playing again?" His expression was rather annoyed. Deng Gonggong smiled and did not say anything more, but Shen Miao felt that there was some meaning in that smile. After entering the palace, Deng Gonggong brought the two of them straight to Jinhua Palace. Jinhua Palace was where Consort Jing stayed. It was already midnight, but Jinhua Palace was brightly lit and there was a group of palace maids kneeling in the hall. With one glance, Shen Miao saw that Emperor Yonglu and Empress Xianda were also there. Both of them were sitting in the hall. Empress Xianda did not look any different as she was still calm and indifferent, but Emperor Yongli's face was like frost. Shen Miao and Xie Jingxing walked in hand and Deng Gonggong quickly reported. When Emperor Yongli saw Shen Miao coming, he was slightly surprised, but Empress Xianda stood up and smiled as she walked over to Shen Miao. She held Shen Miao's hand and said intimately, "Previously your body was not well and one wanted to let you enter the palace to talk. Who knew that so many things happened? One did not think that you would come so late tonight." Shen Miao smiled. "One did not know what happened when your highness entered the palace, so one followed." Empress Xianda asked her, "Is your body better?" Shen Miao said, "Already recovered. Many thanks to your ladyship's concern." Empress Xianda smiled. "Then Ben Gong is relieved." Xie Jingxing looked at Emperor Yonglu and asked with a calm face, "Imperial older brother, what happened?" Everyone knew that Empress Xianda would definitely not push Consort Jing into the pond. Now that Consort Jing had not woken up and Emperor Yonglu had already started to take action against the Lu family, there was no need to care about the Lu family's face, so why would he summon Xie Jingxing into the palace because of Consort Jing's body? Monarch Yonglu said coldly, "The Lu clan just came." "Came here?" Xie Jingxing frowned and said, "When I came in, I did not see the Lu family." The Lu family pestered endlessly and relied on their meritorious deeds to be cocky. Now that Jing Fei had fallen into the water and the Lu family had suffered losses under the hands of Emperor Yonglu, they would definitely take this chance to make a fuss. At the very least, they would not let Empress Xianda go. Now there was not even a shadow of the Lu family. Could it be that the Lu family had already caused trouble on their way here? They aren't afraid that something will happen to Jing Fei. The one who spoke was Empress Xianda. They are just fearless. Shen Miao's heart moved. Fearless? What did these words mean? Just as he was thinking, he saw the imperial physician of the palace walk out of the bedroom. He walked in front of Emperor Yonglu and bowed, replying, "Your Majesty, Imperial Consort Jing fell into the water and caught a cold. Luckily, her body is not bad and the dragon seed in her stomach is still fine. After taking 2 batches of medicine and resting for a while, both mother and child will definitely be safe." Jing Fei was pregnant? Shen Miao and Xie Jingxing were startled at the same time. Subconsciously, Shen Miao looked towards Empress Xianda. Empress Xianda's spring lips slightly raised and she looked as calm and generous as usual. It was just that Shen Miao felt that there was some ridicule in that smile. Looking at Emperor Yonglu again, his eyes were cold and his face was as deep as water. No matter how one looked at it, it did not look like he was happy. It seemed that Jing Fei had woken up in the room and started to call out, "Your Majesty, this Xie wants to see Your Majesty." Xie Jingxing looked at Emperor Yonglu with a smile that was not a smile, but Emperor Yonglu turned his head to look at Empress Xianda. Empress Xianda smiled gently, "Your Majesty should also go and see Jing Fei. The child is after all innocent." She then looked towards Xie Jingxing. "The Emperor will most likely want to speak to you in a while. Wait here for a while." She then said to Shen Miao, "After being tossed around for so long, Ben Gong also need to go back and change clothes. Qin Wang Fei should accompany Ben Gong. One fear that one would go crazy in the middle of the night. There is just hot tea in Wei Yang Palace." Chapter 1025. Empress Xianda was so dignified that one couldn't see anything wrong with her, but the more calm she was, the more uncomfortable it made people feel. Shen Miao saw that a large piece of Empress Xianda's skirt was wet and thought that she must have been at the pond with Consort Jing. When Consort Jing fell into the water, Empress Xianda's clothes were also wet. However, probably because he had been worried about Lu Jing, he didn't bother to change into a clean set of clothes. She nodded and said, "All right." Emperor Yongle stared at Empress Xianda and didn't speak. In the room, Jing Fei's calls became more and more delicate. Empress Xianda said, "Your Majesty should go in early to see. The one who is tired is not Jing Fei, but the child in Jing Fei's stomach." Finishing, she didn't care what expression Emperor Yongle had and pulled Shen Miao away. As soon as they left the Jinghua Palace, the air outside seemed to be much fresher. Long Ye's bitter summer was about to end. Not long after, the weather would gradually turn cold and it would be the beginning of autumn. Nowadays, the better the flowers bloomed in the summer, the more desolate the withering ones would be in the future. Shen Miao lowered her head and thought of the strange atmosphere between Emperor Yongle and Empress Xianda just now. She felt that Empress Xianda was a bit tired today. Even when they were in Jinghua Palace, she was at odds with Emperor Yongle. This was different to Empress Xianda's steady personality. Maybe it was because of Jing Fei's child? That's right, Empress Xianda had no children. Ever since the first time Shen Miao entered the palace, she discovered that Emperor Yongle was currently in his prime but did not have any heirs. The reason why the Lu and Yi clans had so many followers in the imperial court, aside from the power left behind by the previous emperor, was that they did not have any heirs. No matter how one looked at it, an emperor without his own children would not last long. But now Jing Fei had one? If Jing Fei gave birth to a son, would he have to be the future heir apparent? Then wouldn't the world be tied together with the Lu family in the end? Outside relatives monopolizing power was what Emperor Yongle didn't want to see the most. No wonder Emperor Yongle wasn't happy at all when he heard Jing Fei was pregnant. However, Empress Xianda's unhappiness was probably not only because of the position of Empress, but also because of her jealousy as a woman. Bystanders could see more clearly. Looking at a problem from an outsider's point of view was always the clearest. It was the same for Shen Miao. The way Empress Xianda looked at Emperor Yongle was exactly the same as how she looked at Fu Xiuyi. She loved her husband deeply, but in the end, another woman was pregnant with her husband's child. Even someone as calm as Xianda Empress would feel a sliver of displeasure in her heart. She was just a woman after all. Qin Wang Fei. Empress Xianda's voice came into her ears. Shen Miao recovered to her senses and Empress Xianda was already looking at her with a somewhat tolerant smile. "You were lost in thought and did not even hear what Ben Gong said." Shen Miao quickly apologized. "One has offended your ladyship. There is no need to be like this." Empress Xianda did not put it to heart and said, "It is so late, it is natural for people to be distracted due to tiredness. Qin Wang Fei does not have to blame yourself." As Shen Miao walked, she could not help but ask, "Your ladyship, this official's wife wants to ask you something?" "Excuse me, did you really push Consort Jing into the water?" Empress Xianda paused for a moment and then looked at her with a smile. "What does Qin Wang Fei think?" "Her ladyship would definitely not do that. Consort Jing did not just enter the palace and your ladyship had lived peacefully with her for many years, so it is not worthwhile to deal with her at this critical juncture." Shen Miao said, "So this official's wife is very curious. Why did your ladyship admit to this crime?" Empress Xianda stopped her footsteps and looked at Shen Miao with a smile. "You really believe in Ben Gong? Actually, it is strange to talk about it. The first time Ben Gong saw you, I felt that you are very similar to Ben Gong, but your temperament is more intense. Most likely it is because your father is a military general. Ben Gong had heard a lot of things about you. Even though you have many methods and schemes, you have the heroic spirit of a family of generals when you do things, straightforward and efficient. Ben Gong cannot do it as civil officials pay particular attention to roundabout ways. Even if Ben Gong wanted to be extreme, it would be soft and soft until the end, so you and Ben Gong are ultimately different." Chapter 1026. Shen Miao was silent. Empress Xianda smiled again. "Ben Gong indeed do not need to push her into the pond. The emperor understands this logic and the Lu family also understand. The only one that does not understand is Lu Jing. As for this crime, it does not matter. The purpose of framing a person is to deceive the world. But even you who just came to Longyi know about this lie, much less the officials of Longyi. Shen Miao asked, "Does your ladyship not explain?" Ben Gong is too lazy to explain and disdain to explain. Do what Jing Fei wants. Ben Gong does not care at all. Empress Yen said lightly. Shen Miao thought that in this aspect, she was completely different from Empress Yen. If it was her, if it was not her own crime, no matter how disdainful she was, she would not admit it herself. No matter how she changed, she was still fierce in her bones. Empress Yen was like a puddle of water, tolerant and calm, making others feel that they were very small in front of her. As they were talking, unknowingly, Wei Yang Palace was already in front of them. Tao Gugu was waiting at the door, and seeing the two of them return, she quickly walked in front of Empress Yenda and said, "Is your ladyship well? Is Jing Fei Yang all right?" After Jing Fei fell into the water, Empress Yenda let Tao Gugu return first. Tao Gugu had been worried, but Empress Yenda only returned now. Empress Yenda did not answer Tao Gugu's question and smiled. "Nothing. Ben Gong will go and change clothes first. Tao Gugu, bring Qin Wang Fei to the hall to sit and pour some hot tea for her." Finishing, she went inside to change clothes. Tao Gugu brought Shen Miao to the hall, and the tea was just right. Tao Gugu poured tea for Shen Miao and could not help but ask, "Qin Wang Fei, what is the matter with that Jing Fei Yang? Nothing serious happened, right? What took you so long?" He was a loyal servant who was burning with anxiety. Shen Miao thought about it and said, "Jing Fei is fine and the child in her stomach is also well." Tao Gugu was startled and almost spilled the tea. When she reacted, she quickly stopped her actions, but her face was very pale. Shen Miao saw her like this and asked, "Previously when Jing Fei was pregnant, you all did not know?" Tao Gugu forced a smile. "Qin Wang Fei is joking. How would she know? If she knew..." She didn't continue. Shen Miao did not miss the flash of anger and resentment on Tao Gugu's face as she thought what would happen if she knew about it. Would she first snuff out the child in her belly, like the women in the harem often did? Just as he was thinking, Empress Xianda came out from inside. She changed her clothes, and the one that she changed into was a moon-white gauze long dress that was faintly discernible, embroidered with orchids. One had to say that after taking off the Empress's court attire, Empress Xianda's temperament was like a different person. When Shen Miao looked carefully, she felt that Empress Xianda's brows were light but comfortable, and her entire body had the taste of a historian. It was similar to Pei Lang, but it was more elegant than Pei Lang. She walked over and sat down beside Shen Miao. She picked up a cup of tea and smiled. "One is very sleepy at night, and with such a cup of tea, it is much warmer." Tao Gugu suddenly knelt down and said, "Nyang Nyang, do you still have the mood to drink tea?" Empress Xianda was startled for a moment and said, "What is this for?" There was a faint harshness in her tone. Tao Gugu was unmoved and still knelt down, but there was some grief and indignation as she said, "Jing Fei is pregnant. She is pregnant and still wants to frame you. You have to endure this. How long do you have to endure for in this lifetime?" These words had somewhat overstepped the identity of a servant to a master, and the originally good atmosphere in the room suddenly turned cold. Shen Miao looked down and did not speak as she held the tea. Empress Xianda said, "Qiu Shui, you have followed Ben Gong for so many years, and Ben Gong treat you as a relative, but you are too overstepping the rules." Chapter 1027. Tao Gugu was not willing to stand up. After a moment, Empress Xianda sighed and said, "Never mind. Lu Jing does not know that she is pregnant. Ben Gong is very clear of Lu Jing's character. If she was pregnant, she would not dare to use the child in her stomach to harm Ben Gong. She would only protect the dragon seed and would not let anything happen to the child. But now it is a fact that Consort Jing is pregnant." Tao Gugu raised her head. "Your ladyship must also think for yourself." Shen Miao finally was no longer silent. She said, "Tao Gugu's words are right. One must consider the matter of Consort Jing. It is not all for your ladyship. Even with the Lu family's current situation, "For your majesty, your ladyship cannot just watch from the sidelines." Empress Xianda looked at her strangely, as if she did not think that Shen Miao would speak at this juncture. But she quickly smiled in relief and said, "It seems that Jing Xing had told you a lot." "Get up, Qiu Shuai." Empress Xianda said to Tao Gugu. Ben Gong do not want to say it a second time. This sentence was already spoken in a commanding tone. Tao Gugu hesitated for a moment before finally standing up. Empress Xianda looked at Shen Miao. "Let you see a joke. Qiu Shuai is Ben Gong's closest person and wholeheartedly thinks for Ben Gong. One spoke too hastily, but one's heart is good." She sighed. Actually, Ben Gong had always thought that Lu Jing was stupid and Ben Gong disdained to compete with her. But now it seems that Ben Gong was wrong. Lu Jing still has some ability to avoid the seed soup and be pregnant with the emperor's child. Shen Miao's heart moved. Empress Xianda told her the secrets of the palace. In fact, the more one knew, the more dangerous it was. Those who knew the secrets of the palace would eventually become fertilizer for the flowers in the palace. But she did not know why. She felt that Empress Xianda only told her this because she wanted to tell her, and not because she knew more. "You are a smart one and think that you have seen that the emperor does not have any children in the palace. It is not because of the consorts or the emperor himself, but because they would drink the seed soup. This Lu Jing had drunk it before, but I don't know why. She must have used some method to get pregnant. This is probably the first in the palace." After saying that, she seemed to have thought of something and smiled. "Perhaps it's not the first. I once had a child, but it was a miscarriage." Aunt Tao's eyes reddened when she heard this. Shen Miao's hand that was holding the teacup trembled, and she did not speak. "His Majesty often thinks that you are not good, because he thinks that Jing Xing is the best. An ordinary girl, even if she is a fairy, is probably not worth mentioning in his eyes. In the beginning, when Jing Xing said that he wanted to marry a Ming Qi's young lady, His Majesty found people to inquire a lot about you, and after hearing about it, he told Ben Gong that you are vicious." Empress Xianda suddenly changed the topic and looked at Shen Miao. "But looking at it now, Ben Gong feel that you are very kind." Shen Miao did not understand and heard Empress Xianda speaking again. "You obviously wanted to ask Ben Gong about the miscarriage, but were afraid that it would cause Ben Gong's heart to be sad, so you endured and did not ask." Shen Miao softly said, "This official's wife just do not dare. You are really straightforward. Jing Xing found an interesting wife and Ben Gong like you even more." Empress Xianda smiled. She said, "Actually, the matter has passed for a long time and Ben Gong is already relieved. At the beginning, when Ben Gong was pregnant, Lu Jing added cold herbs into the dim sum that the imperial chefs made. Just a little bit and Ben Gong's child was gone. At that time, Lu Jing had just entered the palace and was favored, and the Lu family watched, thus His Majesty could only punish her lightly. Ben Gong felt that there was no fate between her and the child, so it was fine. Chapter 1028. Just by listening, Shen Miao could already guess the heart-wrenching pain. In the previous lifetime, in the inner palace of Ming Qi, the concubines fought with each other for the emperor's favor. The inner palace was the battlefield for females, and when females were ruthless, they were sometimes even more terrifying than males. Many of the children of the concubines became victims under such circumstances, and no matter how vicious the concubines were, at the moment they lost their children, they would cry out in despair. Did the calm and gentle Empress Xianda in front of her also experience that kind of despair before? Scars would take a long time to heal, and only one would know the pain of scars. The most hateful thing was that one could not even take revenge for the child. Why was this so? Do not blame His Majesty and do not think that Ben Gong is pitiful. Even though Ben Gong is indeed pitiful, Ben Gong is also an evil person. Empress Xianda said, after Ben Gong's miscarriage, Ben Gong could no longer give birth and would not be able to have children in this lifetime. Thus His Majesty made all the females in the inner palace unable to give birth to his children. If Ben Gong is not good, everyone would not be well off. Shen Miao was startled. Because Empress Xianda could not give birth, so Emperor Yongle made all the females in the palace unable to give birth? Then Emperor Yongle should like Empress Xianda very much, but if he really liked her, why would he let Empress Xianda suffer such a big grievance? Even if Empress Xianda did not mention it, Emperor Yongle himself would also want to kill the culprit of his children, so why would he treat her as his favored concubine? Shen Miao only felt that the secrets of the imperial family of the Great Liang were no less than those of the Mingqi. Empress Xianda saw her startled appearance and suddenly laughed. You really believe it? How would His Majesty give up all the children of the concubines because of Bengong? Jing Xing could do it because Jing Xing's luck was good but His Majesty's luck was bad. He is the emperor. There were many meanings in these words and Shen Miao did not know how to continue the conversation. But what you said is right. One should naturally plan for the future. Lu Jing, this child came at the right time and because of this child, her life was temporarily saved. But the Lu family would not have such good luck. Empress Xianda gently smiled and her smile became somewhat sharp. The child cannot be kept. In the imperial study, Xie Jingxing's eyes were cold as he spoke to the emperor in front. Zhen knows that it cannot be kept. If it is possible, Zhen hopes that one can force it to be kept. Emperor Yongle spoke coldly, as though the person he was about to force down wasn't his son, but someone else. Why didn't you do it just now? Xie Jingxing asked sharply. Qingzhen did not allow. Emperor said. Qingzhen was Empress Xianda's maiden name, and this name had not come out of Emperor Yongle's mouth for a long time. After a long while, Xie Jingxing then ridiculed. Imperial Saw had always been soft-hearted, perhaps it was because she pitied her own flesh and blood that had died. Xie Yuan. These words Emperor Yong Emperors Emperor Qing. Emperors Long's king, one emperor, Xie's and emperor, a other, Qi, Qing emperor, king one of the other. I do not care what happens to Lu Jing and I do not want to care about that child. The Lu family came and left. They definitely think that the child in Lu Jing's stomach is a protective talisman. Why would we give them such a big gift? The emperor who did not have any children suddenly had his only child. So this only child was a life-saving straw. Whether Emperor Yongle was willing or not, the position of the heir apparent had landed on the child in Jing Fei's stomach. So when the Lu family came today and saw that Jing Fei was pregnant, they did not make a fuss and quickly left. Maybe in their eyes, Empress Xianda's position as empress was going to be gone soon. They didn't even have time to feel pity and would not be unforgiving. They would just treat it as their benevolence and doing a good deed. They had no worries like this, but what was the reality? Since ancient times, there were 4 words, the affairs of the world are hard to predict. The Lu family always forget one thing. You and I are both surnamed Xie and the blood of the Xie family flows in our bodies. Emperor Yongle said indifferently, and the Xie family are all heartless. Chapter 1029. On the way back, Shen Miao thought about what Empress Xianda said and her heart could not calm down for a long time. In the end, Jing Fei and her child were safe, and Empress Xianda did not get into any trouble because of this. It seemed to be a very happy ending, but Shen Miao felt that something was not right. When they returned to the residence of Prince Rui, it was almost dawn and it would be very late if they were to sleep now. Moreover, Shen Miao was not in the mood to rest. When Jing Zhenguyu saw this, they instructed the small kitchen to cook some sweet soup for both of them. Shen Miao and Xie Jingxing returned to the room and closed the door before sitting at the table. She looked at Xie Jingxing and said, now that consort Jing is pregnant, what should the Lu family do? Logically, Emperor Wen Yongle didn't have any other children, so the child Jing Fei was pregnant with was precious. If she was pregnant with a son, then if there were no accidents, the position of the future heir apparent would naturally belong to the child in Jing Fei's belly. Logically speaking, that should be the case. But Empress Xianda's words were very disapproving. This made people think deeply. Unless Emperor Yongle had other children, why would he be like this? The Lu family had nothing to fear because of Jing Fei. Was Yongle Emperor's plan to deal with the Lu family going to be stopped because of this? Shen Miao felt that it was impossible. When Xie Jingxing heard it, he lightly said, Imperial older brother has already made a move against the Lu family. There is no difference whether he is alive or not. The meaning in these words was that the child in Jing Fei's womb was one thing and the ending of the Lu family was another. At most, Jing Fei would temporarily keep her life because of her child. The Lu family would still fall according to the original plan. Shen Miao frowned. I spoke to her ladyship and felt that it was somewhat strange. One heard that her ladyship had a miscarriage and it was because of consort Jing. We can't say if this was intentional, but no matter how magnanimous the Empress is, how could she safely watch Jing Fei live well for so many years? Xie Jingxing was pouring tea for her, but his actions paused when he heard this. Shen Miao stared at him. Tell me honestly, why does His Majesty not have an heir until now? Is it intentional or is it a last resort? She thought about it and felt that it was too strange that Emperor Yongle did not have any children. Every emperor, regardless of whether they were wise or incapable, hoped to have as many children as possible. The more princes there were, the more balanced they would be, and the more stable dynasty situation would be. Even for a person like Fu Xiuyi, he never lacked heirs. Previously, Shen Miao found it strange that Emperor Yongli's political achievements were so outstanding and the people lived and worked in peace, so how could the court still be unstable until now? Later when she saw his son, she understood. This was because Emperor Yongle did not have any children. Just this point alone was enough to make the courtiers complain. Speaking of which, Emperor Yongle was already very impressive. If it was an ordinary emperor who did not have children, not to mention maintaining the balance for so many years, he would have long been stripped of his imperial robes and thrown off the stage to become an ordinary person. Xie Jingxing then looked at Shen Miao after a long time and his gaze was somewhat strange. You really want to know? After you returned from the imperial hunting grounds, when you were unconscious, I had a premonition that some things would change, but at that time I had just arrived at Longyi and did not know much about the situation of the Great Liang, so I could not help much. So other than going to the Phoenix Head Manor to look for that expert, I could not help with anything else. Shen Miao said, I do not like to be so passive. If there is a day that you also have something big to do, I hope that I will not be useless. But I do not know anything, so even if I have the heart, how can I help? Xie Jingxing looked at her for a while and suddenly sighed. He was half gratified and half teasing as he touched her head. Our family's Jiao Jiao is not only good at calculating people, but also considerate. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.